Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Starbase Weekly. This is episode 71. My name is Mauricio, and I'll pass this along to Indian Stars.
Welcome, everybody. Episode 71 flyover photos and ground photos and immaculate flyover photos. You guys are going to be so excited. Jax, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, hello everybody. I hope you're all having a good day, afternoon, evening, whatever. Yeah, lots of photos to look at. It's another week. It's been a lot of progress. Over to you, Thomas.
Thomas.
All right. I will take over for Thomas, and I would like to point out how excited you sound, Jax.
Thank you.
As always. But hello, everybody, and welcome to the Starbase Weekly live stream. As Mauricio said, we, as you can tell, finally got a clear day for Mauricio to get up there and get some shots. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that last week, but luckily, well, I won't say luckily, but the damage is still there for us to view in a little bit more detail this week. So we're going to be covering the launch site progress a bit later in the show. But we also have some fantastic images from the ground and also just of the rest of the site in general. There is a lot going on this week. It seems like, in my opinion, there was a lot of teams at Starbase who were waiting to get on and move on to or continue with projects that they were in the process of doing. So as soon as that launch ended, they got back to work really quickly. So we're going to see all of the new updates that are happening this week, and I'll check and see if we have Thomas with us.
Yeah, I should be here, but I guess you weren't able to hear me earlier. So hopefully my mic doesn't have any cold feet on it.
We can hear you now.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to be here, and it's going to be exciting. So let's jump in.
All right. Well, in that case, we are going to start over at the Massey site where we had some interesting developments over the last week. Oh, okay. I guess my Stream Deck decided to not work here, but that's okay. Let's see.
There we go. Nice.
Oh, I guess it is working now. That was odd. All right. Let me try that again. Massey's. So actually, before I show this image right here, we had some updates from earlier in the week before Mauricio did that flyover. So the first time he did the flyover of Massey's, it was actually kind of cloudy over there. Wasn't able to get the greatest images. But we will come back to this one in a bit so we can see what it looked like before. But we had a bit of news happening at the Massey site. Lab Padre posted this on Twitter. There was actually a fire earlier in the week, so I'll swap over to that here. So this happened on, as you can tell, 2 days ago? A little bit late in the evening, right as the sun was about to go down. But I'm guessing Lab got a tip that there was a fire over there, or either saw it himself and swapped the camera over there. But yeah, this was a pretty bad looking at first because we didn't know what it was that was burning, and obviously we don't want any more setbacks in the processes at Starbase. So this was a little concerning when we first saw it, but luckily Mauricio was able to get up in the air and get us some images of what actually went down. This fire went until like early in the morning hours. I was kind of surprised it went on for that long. It didn't seem like they were actually putting it out or anything like that, but we weren't really there to tell whether or not that was occurring. But either way, let's take a look at what happened on the ground.
Do we know what actually lit on fire?
We are about to witness it, so let's check it out. We got, I think, I need to get the right angle of this, and that's not the right angle. I think it's this third one. Okay, so this is a little zoomed in, but so you can see there wasn't a whole lot of damage out here, which is great news. But it seems like it was mostly like an equipment fire, and so this is a zoomed in image that Mauricio has from his drone. But I believe we had a few light posts. Actually, the light post that I'm seeing here is still present, but I think there was a telehandler in here. This is a telehandler right there. No idea what this is. I think it could have been like a generator or something. But yeah, I mean, honestly, for how long it burned, it seemed like it was something else. So that, like I said, this is great news that that's all that happened. Let me see if we can find it from a different angle, though. Oh, that's better. Yeah, so it was just whatever was on the backside of the nose cone testing structure burned. We don't really know what the deal was with that. Don't really get those kind of updates. But like I said, the good news is that there was no damage to any of the testing structures. And as far as we know, there was no injuries. So that's always a great thing to hear. But we have a lot of other updates that have happened at Massey's this week. I don't know if where we want to start, Jax or Thomas.
I would definitely keep it in the same area because these two things could be related. We'll have to see it from either the ground shots that Mauricio took or just the other side of. You can barely see it here, but the ground shots really show it. So if we go to basically the nose cone, this is a big one. So we're kind of starting off the news stories today here with the big items. We've had a successful broken nose. So the nose cone jail has basically done its job, and they've gone through and crushed the nose. So you could see that the dents are quite prevalent. It's even worse than we saw in nose cone 12. So they're really putting it through its paces.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I have a question on this one. What does this mean, Jax? Because, from my point of view, not being the Starship expert, I'm kind of curious what it means that this kind of test happened now, because as far as I can tell, looks like this was done after the launch. So, I mean, this is still a structural verification of the actual nose cone, right? Like, why would this be done after the launch?
Yeah, so nose cone 31 here was used to verify various aerodynamic or the various loads on the nose cone in terms of the actual structure that it would experience during the flight. It was brought out to Massey's, I think, couple months ago at this point, and it's because we have so little coverage at Massey's. It's hard to be certain of when it was tested. I do believe that it was tested some period of time before the launch. I can't remember the exact dates, but I know they had the hatches on it sealed, and they were opened up not long after. I have a feeling that could have been a test, maybe not quite as extreme as this. Maybe just enough to be like, yeah, ship 24 is able to survive max Q in terms of the actual fairing. Now, this test here, we can only speculate that what the actual testing configuration was. It could have been a test of failure. It could have been a bad test. It's hard to be certain. I'd like to think it's a test of failure, and I think it's definitely possible that it is, because you can see these quite large buckles on the side of it, and given the shape of this nose cone, those aren't that size of them and that number of them. It's not a minute thing. It's there would have been some pretty crazy forces put on that thing.
I did go back and confirm on the 26th, those dents were still present. So it was even before the 26th that they had this, because you can see there's an obvious issue with the nose cone. It's got buckling in some interesting places. But it's mostly you can see on the left side, which is harder to see on this. I don't see it here. So it's kind of interesting. But it's that flyover on the 26th was a little bit foggy over the launch site, and you can go back to those photos if you want, Zach. That's a flyover. You can barely tell that there's possibly a dent in the front and a little bit to the left side.
The flyover?
Yeah, so on the flyover on the 26th.
Oh, from the 26th. I don't have those ones loaded. Give me a second. I'm going to have to pull those up unless you have them in live comms. Oh, wait, yeah, sorry. This is the 26th. What am I talking about?
Yeah. The 26th was the same day as this week's flyover. I'm like, uh-oh.
Yeah, I still, it feels like it's been a month since the launch for me, honestly. Let's see if I can get a good angle.
Yeah, they're just to the right. The
Or
ones
you
that
want
are,
these
yeah,
ones?
they're kind of covered over. They're harder to see, but if you look, it looks like some denting on the nose cone. That last one was actually probably even better.
Okay.
But oh wow.
Well, this is the same nose cone that had dents in it from the moment we saw it, remember? It had not as many as it does now, but you had pointed it out, Thomas, in the beginning that it had a little bit of a dent on the side that was closest to when you're entering Massey's, the entrance.
Yeah, just the tiniest of dents that it's like, is that significant? We have to look at it and go, nope, not significant, because it never changed, never was an issue. But this one does kind of look like there's a little bit of something kind of right there, yeah, which is what we would expect to see. But that could just be the weld line. So if that's not a dent, then it was basically between the 26th and yesterday, the 28th. So basically those few days. And there was a fire that happened around that same time. And you could see the telehandler that later caught fire, the blue one. So there could be an issue of, I think it kind of looks like an electrical fire, but there could also be hydraulics involved on this. So if they've got the hydraulics going and doing the can crusher test and things kind of break and basically spill oil everywhere, it would explain why there's a trail of flames. Basically, it would be the hydraulic system had malfunctioned and destroyed some other equipment. That's another speculative element that could be the direction, because if these tests are happening at the same time, then things kind of warm up, and that would be a direction to look at.
Yeah. Somebody in the chat had asked, was nose cone 31 the first made out of the stretched form panels? Because this is the new, smoother, stretched formed nose cone that they've been using, and it really wasn't. This was actually, as far as our tracking is concerned, we believe that this is the 9th smooth nose cone they built and produced. We had observed 2 production pathfinders made at the production site. Then from the 3rd and onwards, they were put ship 24, ship 25, 26, etc. Then they pulled this one out quite a bit later and decided to test it just a few weeks before the launch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to do the test of failure after the launch. Not really sure what to make of that, but yeah, I mean, I guess it's always good to know what that actual failure limit is, because they didn't really they never did this on the nose cone 12, right? Like they never tested it to failure, so
It did buckle quite a bit, but nothing like this. So it would have been like 20% of the buckling that you could see like on these. So you just have a bunch of little divots here and there. This one, it's crushed, it's broken. And there's a couple of interesting points on this that are kind of reasonable to look at. Is SN8, when it basically did its whole collapse on itself and blew up a little bit, the nose cone actually survived, but the area that buckled was the same area as this, just above it mostly, but it was because there was heavy amounts of liquid oxygen in the header tank. And so that was part of it. And you can kind of see that that's a similar theme going on here. So that's just an interesting element to point out. Another one is, as far as tests go, we already had ship 24 launched with the booster. It went through a max Q regime and several other interesting structural tests that it was never intended to do, but it did very well. So we never saw it like crush from the nose or anything like that, where it just disintegrated from the ship. It was pretty much the booster that went first after 4 minutes of having some issues. Actually, 2 minutes of issues in the first 4 or the 4-minute duration of the flight. So yeah, they've already have most of that solved. I just do wonder if they'll add additional structure and then call this done, because there's not really any stringers or anything else in there that adds any more strength. What do you think, Jax? Do you think they'll add more materials at some point? Because this is kind of at least with SN8, a little bit more of a theme.
Well, it highly depends on the what this nose cone was put through, because SN8, nominally your vehicle shouldn't be exploding. So that was
Or
putting
landing very hard like it did.
Yeah. So it depends on what you're preparing for. We don't know what nose cone 31 was necessarily tested to. It may by design be stronger than the older stamped panel design. It theoretically it probably would be, but
Well, that's
obviously
the
you can't be
beauty of
certain.
stretch formed is it does two things. It actually thins out the material a little bit. So we're probably looking at something around like 3.6 millimeter. And it also strengthens the material by doing the stretch form. It does make it a little bit more brittle in that sense, but it is stronger.
I think an interesting observation here is that there's only, well, as far as we can tell, it's only really crumpled on this side. Like I don't really see much along this face. So it kind of looks to me like they were. Well, I guess I should back up. There's two different kinds of tests that you can do with this structure. You can do both max Q and ideally reentry testing. And so with reentry testing, you're more, I think, pulling it in different directions to simulate the loads on the side of the vehicle instead of like the drag forces that are coming directly on the nose during max Q. And so it almost looks to me like it was being pulled in this direction. So there's two pistons up here. There's one right here, and then there's another one back there covered in blue. So if you were pulling on this one and pushing on that one, it would move in this direction. So I'm wondering if that's the kind of test that they were doing here, which would make a lot of sense that, you know, to do the max Q testing first, reentry testing second, because that max Q test is a little more important for that first orbital flight test. But yeah, just a little observation there. I'm not sure if that is actually correct or not, but just something I noticed.
Well, either way, I think it's fair to say 31's done. So off to the scrap heap it goes.
Agreed. All right, well, let's get back to the aerial view because we have a little bit more going on over here at Massey's. So first of all, we had a reveal of a structure that we've been waiting for a while, and I don't know if I'm gonna be able to see it in that one. There we go. So this is the structure that was inside of the tent that was over here for about a month, and they've finally completed it and moved it out here. And this is very interesting. I mean, it looks. If I had like took a guess, like off just first guess, I would say it probably has to do with nose cone testing, but probably not. So I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on this.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because there's no obvious mounting interface that I see for anything. I suppose it could go around the exterior edge there. But yeah, that's just it's a really interesting piece because you can see they have those pairs of vertical things, pedestals, I guess you could call them.
Well, it still fits with the original idea I had in mind of what this would be for, because we had 3 spots that were open and they had these U-shaped channels. So it was either that spot or the spots adjacent to it that are more open that would be for hydraulic rams to do basically testing of the puck shucking really for the ship. And you need a crane to do that. And basically so far, this looks like it would match up. So each of these posts would be for hydraulic ram in between. So it basically keeps it in alignment and location. And then you basically can extend it out and connect it directly to the ship for the RVACs and then the sea levels. So far, everything else fits out. And there's even a little part for the center. So there's actually 4 in the center, which is about right for doing the hydraulic ram tests. They have 4 rams, not just 3.
Yeah, and speaking of those hydraulic thrust rams, they actually have 6 of them beside Ship 25 in the lower left of this photo.
Yep.
They removed them from suborbital pad A and brought them over.
And it still very much fits that idea or that narrative what that particular test article would be for. An interesting thought is I just kind of realized this is if they could go through and disassemble this in some way that it's basically be low grade on parts of it, that you could potentially roll the ship over it, and that would be an interesting direction to go. So let's say there's that area behind it. That would be an interesting use case, but right now it looks like they're building a pad for maybe a crane. So you can see they've gone through and are leveling out the soil and basically getting it ready for concrete work, which will probably happen sometime this week. That's really useful to be able to go through and lift up the booster, or I'm sorry, the ship, and then put it onto the assembly to the right. So that is a direction they could be headed.
Yeah.
I
Please.
still have a question about the nose cone because I was accidentally muted.
Oh, we couldn't hear you. So
No.
good to hear from you then. So what was your question on the nose cone?
So it already had the dent in it. Does that make it weaker and more susceptible to future dents, like while they're doing testing, because it already had the dent in it, so it was already weakened?
It could be a point of failure that when you go through and pull on it, it could be the an area that will fail first. But a lot of the dents you'll see on nose cones or other structures in vehicles is where it's a heat affected area. So that's where they do the welding. So if you have a lot of welding in certain areas, it will change and warp that surface. And so that can actually do one of two things, because you're adding materials, increase the strength of that area, but also because it's warping a little bit, you are adding in some of those geometries that can be that focal point where it wants to fail at. So it can go both directions there. And as far as that particular dent, I don't remember if there was a lot of welding next to it or if it was just in that area.
Just in that area. There wasn't a lot
Okay.
of welding around it. Because it's a smoother nose cone, right? The things are longer and smoother.
Yeah, so stretch form, to kind of explain it, is that they have this this die that they will basically pull it over that's in the shape of the nose cone element, and then they just keep repeating that over and over again. Some of the dies that themselves are actually hydraulic systems that actuate to make the shape that you require. So that's really neat. A lot of aerospace does that. But did you have any other questions on that or this new stand that we're looking at?
No questions on that, but I did want to thank Jessica Kirsch. She's actually in the chat, and she is a ball of joy in the chat. Everybody's loving her jokes. She's hilarious. And she's Jessica Kirsch. And y'all get to hang out with her and all of us. I thought that's kind of cool.
That's awesome. Thank you for joining us, Jessica.
Yeah, and while we're on the subject of the chat, we actually had a ton of donations come in before the show even started. So before Indy gets to those, just wanted to thank everybody for all of those donations. They really go a long way, obviously, with helping Mauricio do the weekly flyovers, but especially with all of the changes that are happening at Starbase right now. Sometimes it may become necessary to do random ones, that aren't in the typical schedule. So it would be. It's really awesome that you guys are helping out with that stuff and giving Mauricio the ability to, potentially make multiple flyovers a week if necessary. We haven't done that yet, but I have a feeling there will be times where it actually becomes necessary here soon, especially with the changes, the repair work going on with the launch mount.
And we have done one double flyover in a week. We did that the week of the launch.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Very true.
Oh, it's something that we've had a couple times happen where Mauricio does a flyover and then the clouds just come in, and what we would have had a perfect view of everything just gets clouded up, and that happened during that double flyover week where it was like, oh, this is excellent. There's a break in the clouds. He can make it, and then the clouds just rolled right back in, and it clobbered a lot of those photos. But we did get a lot of good information, especially out of that launch table and the infrastructure underneath. So every time we have the ability to do multiple flyovers is huge.
Agreed. Indy, did you want to touch on the donations that we got at the beginning of the show?
I would love to, but I don't have access to the ones that happened before the show started because the stream just redid itself. So I have the ones that came in after the stream started, which is we have a £2 donation from Raymond who has a question that Mauricio can answer in just a moment. And I will check our PayPal right now and let you know. Mauricio, do you want to take the questions?
Yeah, I can do that. Okay, so the first question we have is from Martian Whack. This would be the test to failure as others were max Q tests, weren't they? They're talking about Martian is talking about the nose cone test.
Yeah, that sounds about right for nose cone 31 here. They've obviously exceeded its limits, so that's a test to failure. Even if you didn't intend to fail it, they did fail it. So it's no longer a viable test article. And as Jax was pointing out, they were opening up patches and everything else earlier. So it could be that they were going through testing it, going through and bring it to a certain amount, and then at this point between probably the 27th or 26th, because I'm looking at those photos again. I really don't see a lot more of a dent than I should. So I think that was like 26, 27 is when they were really testing this. And yeah, they brought it to failure.
All right, the next question is from Bill Lyer. Would re-entry put more stress on the nose cone?
I wouldn't say it's more stress. It's just a different kind of stress. So during max Q, you're traveling upwards, and so the wind force, like your drag force, is like basically in the axial direction on the ship. Whereas when you're re-entering, you're basically belly flopping into the atmosphere. So the drag forces are pointing at the windward side of the ship instead of the axial direction. So it's just a different kind of stress. I'm not really sure which one is greater. But yeah, that would actually be a good question to know the answer to. But I don't know if you guys have anything to add on that.
Well, so Elon has talked about they want to pressurize the nose cone itself so that it will basically have more resistance to that lateral load. And even during max Q, it'll help a little bit. So being able to do those things is perfectly valid. And one thing to kind of look at is the left and right. We've got these basically poles that are connected to it. Those are where basically the flaps would be. So that's an interesting area that I don't see a whole lot of damage there. So it indicates that we weren't really damaged it during a, let's say, a reentry testing that was exceeding limits or something like that. So let's say if you go too shallow of an angle, you're basically, let's say if you did 90 degrees straight down with a reentry, it's going to get really hot really quickly, and there's going to be a lot of forces on those flaps. You'd burn up in reentry either way, but we don't see anything like that here. So max Q is what they were really testing. And you will actually have some lateral loads during max Q, especially if your vehicle's out of control like it was with Ship 24. So I kind of wonder, is like, wait, could they have been testing the nose cone with the parameters that basically Ship 24 went through, just to see it from a different angle and different perspective? Because now they have some of that flight data. You could throw it at the test article that's sitting here, and you've already done several tests with it, I assume. So now go ahead and put it through some extra limits, and that could be a scenario that could have happened as well.
So you program in multiple somersaults into the program.
Yeah, well, pretty much. I mean, you're putting some lateral loads into it, but I mean, again, this is more of a downwards direction. You'll have some lateral forces in the that little black cone that can cause it to shift left or shift right from the top, and that black cone is basically what is being controlled. It's being pulled down and it's being pushed left and pushed right, or forward and left and right. So it's an interesting dynamic to see. Do we have any other questions, Mauricio?
We do have other questions. I can take over from Mauricio.
Okay.
There was a question about there's a question about so I know he's corrected me on saying his handle so many times, and I hope I don't mess it up. Just a mimo? No, it's not right. But anyways, he says if no catastrophic nose cone failure this test or OFT1, does that equal no worries?
Well, one thing that we're going to see as a change is the dynamic pressure we're going to go through. So the max Q can actually happen lower down in the troposphere, or just above the troposphere. That's going to be the densest layer of the atmosphere, because they're doing one big thing that's a change is they want to go through and say no throttling on the engines through a max Q regime. And I think they were kind of throttling it through that area because it does seem to accelerate a little bit more, but it's also a lighter vehicle, so it does want to accelerate more. But they're also going to a Raptor 2.5 version, which is going to be 250 metric tons of thrust for each of the engines versus the 230 that it currently is at. So I'd have to bring up a quick calculator here. So 230 times 33 is going to be that 7,500 or 7,600 metric tons is about what that would be. And then compare that to the 250. You get that it's going to be 8,250 metric tons of thrust if that's full throttle through max Q. So you want to be able to do that because you can actually get higher payloads or higher weighted payloads into orbit, or at least have a safety margin in case you're having other issues there. So that's a huge benefit to testing this out and seeing what your max Q regime actually is going to be on the pressure.
Fair enough. I think these are all the questions that we have regarding the nose cone or in Massey's for now. We have other questions, but we'll get to that area.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and move over to the Sanchez site then.
Okay. There was one
and-
other thing at Massey's I wanted to
Oh, sorry.
point out.
Let's do it.
That's new. It's a ground shot photo that is of the what's on the cam crusher. So if you can get a ground photo shot of that, I think it would be to the left of where you're looking at. That's not the can crusher. That's the one right there. Perfect. So you can see they've put on the additional elements to connect the can crusher to this this test article. And the good news here is that this is probably up next for testing. So we should see some interesting action here. This is going to be a puck shucking test on the can crusher. But that was just one thing I wanted to point out because we only had a couple of these little triangle fins on it that are just to basically go through and add structure and rigidity while they go through and test it.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's pressure lines attached to it. So they're going to do some additional work there too.
This specific test article from, I think what we've seen, it looks like they're going to be thrust ramming the 6 engine mounts of the Starship upper stage. So the 3 vacuum engines and the 3 gimbaling engines. They all, I don't think they have on this test article. They did on Ship 24. So I wonder if they're going to push it a bit further than they normally would. Maybe find the limits. It's the can crusher. It's the puck crusher.
To kind of reiterate what that is, because some people might be new to this, they have all these hydraulic rams on the outside, which for a booster or test article for a booster, it pulls down on it and basically verifies the structural load there. There are hydraulic rams on the inside where it pushes on the puck, and you don't want to shuck the puck, as Elon called it.
Don't shuck the puck.
Yes, exactly. Like shucking corn. You don't want that to happen. So they put pressure on it underneath. And it's the same reason I named it the can crusher, is because you don't want to crush the can. It's, a test vehicle in that sense. You want to see what its limits are, but you don't want to exceed those limits. And I think we're good on Massey's now that we've jumped into that.
Right.
It was just my speak now moment.
Or for
Cool. Well, then we will hop over to Sanchez. It is getting pretty busy down here. I think, there was a time where we felt like they were cleaning all of it up, but I guess they were cleaning all of it up so they could add more stuff down here. But a lot of the stuff in the middle down here is things that got moved out of the launch site in order for them to do the first IFT. But we do have some more updates going on down here. I think actually most of the water deluge stuff is kind of looking the same, but I guess we should stop calling it water deluge.
instead, we should call it what then?
Yeah, I don't believe that it is water deluge. I mean, Elon has kind of said, we kind of had an idea of what this was over the last few months. The actual plates that will go underneath the launch mount to supply the water for the center of the table. But yeah, this is actually, as we mentioned in previous weeks, the water-cooled plates that they will be putting underneath the launch mount. And there's a bunch of them missing here. I'm guessing they're probably inside of the tent over there on the left. But yeah, we haven't seen a whole lot of progress with that. They did deliver a ton of little tiny pipes that looks like they will be replacing the ones that were removed from both of these, which is interesting because I wonder if these ones are the ones that are still not level, because that's one thing that we noticed when we saw them from the ground angle, is that they all seem to be like different lengths. So unsure if these are just corrected in their lengths, or if they're just completely new pieces that are the exact same. I have no idea.
Did you have an alternate name instead of deluge?
The water cooled plates.
Oh, we're just going to call. Okay, fair enough.
I don't really know of any other name to call them. I mean, that's what they're for. You know, they're basically to replace the base, the blast surface of the launch mount. And yeah, this was, I guess, initially, you know, they wanted to get this done before the first launch, but also did not want to take the time to do that. But yeah, we should hopefully see that coming soon once they repair the foundation to the launch mount. So we're still keeping our eyes on this, but they do have a bunch of new. This is really odd over here. So they've set up a welding tent. I guess this is a lot taller than it looks like from this angle. But they are about to start doing some work to all of these elbow sections over here, and I believe there's more inside of this tent, but it's really tough to see in there.
This is two I-beams. We saw that what was here last week. So there's two I-beams with some cross pieces that basically connect the two. And one thing that was interesting is that these look very similar to what's at like Slick 40. A lot of stuff looks like it would be what would be at Slick 40 is how they set up their not deluge system, but deluge system. It's one of those interesting issues that we're kind of wondering if there's going to be some pipes going up the length of it to, let's say, do the second stage, basically for their two-stage water system, which would be, I think that's still deluge, but it's interesting because a lot of this stuff has like flame diverter labels as well. So that's direction that SpaceX will call them as technical elements. Like it's a flame diverter, but it's a flat flame diverter, not one that's angled or anything like that. So like going directly to just a steel plate bottom that are water cooled is absolutely the best direction at this point that they could do, because obviously what they did with Fondag didn't work.
Yeah. And you know, I'm still wondering if and I highly doubt they are part of it, but just given the color that they're painted, I'm still wondering if this is part of that system somehow. I mean, this could simply be to protect like above ground pipes if they're not able to actually run everything underground. But yeah, I mean, just given the color of it alone, it's clearly related to this. But it'll be interesting to see how that ends up being oriented when they set it up.
And we figured those were going to be blast diverters, not flame diverters, but blast diverters. So similar like you see at the end of a runway. So it prevents damage for infrastructure like cars or things like that. In this case, it's going to be potentially pipes or other infrastructure near the launch mount, but not too close to it. And Anystar, you had a question as well?
I did, and then it went away. Sorry.
Okay. We were talking about the plates earlier, if that rings the bell.
Nope. Thank you, though.
Okay.
All right. Well, moving on from sorry, did you have any more you wanted to add on that, Thomas? Because I haven't really seen too much other progress on this.
Well, that's the thing, is the lack of progress, lack of pushing to get things done or changed here. Like all we really have from this week is those new pipes, and that's it. And a little bit more of that 4-piece structure that was just right there. So those basically go to looks like the bottom of the tanks. I was thinking they're going to the top, but they're about 2 feet in diameter for those outlets, and that would basically be where your water goes in to basically add water to the tanks. So that's one of the 2 new pieces, that and the other pipes. But that's it. That's all we've seen. They're continuing to work on stuff, but the plates themselves, I am wondering if they're changing some of their approaches to how they're going to do some of the pipe work and the plates themselves, because they've had such a massive shift and change of soil and other things. It's like, well, we can go ahead and redo infrastructure we were not planning to redo. that might be something that comes up, because they have to maybe redesign some things. I think the idea is still the direction they go with the water cooled steel plates, but it just might be larger as far as the size and scope.
Oh, so just to kind of give everybody an idea what you're talking about, so essentially that black piece right there that Thomas is mentioning should go on top of these tanks right here.
Just actually on the bottom left here, or potentially on the right. I think they have the same thing. So go to the left a little bit.
Oh, these?
Yeah, those right there. So this is where the water would come in to refill the tank. So either on this side or on the other side. I think they have a similar. Nope, it's just on this left side. I can't see it on the right. So yeah, they would be able to fill it up there. So we went through and we were looking at it and trying to get the measurements, and that's about 2 feet, which matches those other elements that we were looking at Sanchez.
Right.
There
Yeah,
should
that
also,
makes sense.
yeah, and there should also be a pipe that goes on top. I thought that's what this one was for. The spacing's right, but the diameters for these particular parts are not. So the top piece would basically go directly to the COPVs. That's where you get pressure at, and that's a really cool system that they have basically at Slick 40. Again, a lot of the stuff that are at Slick 40 is basically happening here as well, I think.
It looks like there's actually 3 inlets on the top. I wonder if this one maybe almost looks like overflow protection or something like that. But then you're obviously going to need somewhere to inject your nitrogen, right?
Yeah.
So maybe from either side.
Well, at Slick 40, they have it right down the center for where they're putting pressure in. So I assume that that's what they're doing here as well, based off of that one pipe segment we saw that I, basically mislabeled as going on top. That actually is going on the bottom. But you just basically go through and create a similar pipe with smaller flanges, and then go through and connect it to the COPVs that will be on the left. So you see the one COPV system that's already in place. There's going to be a huge stack of them. They've got the black ones and the white ones, and it's going to be a lot of pressure just to be able to push that water. And I think that's the system they're going for. At least they were planning for. Things I think are changing again very rapidly because of what happened with Ship 24 and 7. Basically, 7 really did damage to that pad. But yeah, let's go back to the Sanchez site before we move on to the more of this site. By the way, lots of scrap stainless steel pipe work over there. That was kind of interesting. Just off to the right that you just passed.
Oh, in this little bin
Yeah.
right here.
Just kind of odd that they're going through so much of it.
Yeah, I wonder if this is left over from the work that they did at the Massey site, because they built most of that. They did a lot of the prefab on that stuff here. They also did some of it while they were at that site as well too, but I think this may have something to do with that. Unsure though.
Perhaps, but that's pretty interesting. We didn't touch the elephant in the room too much. That the
It's the elephant.
manifolds, they're gone. The ones that are to the right.
Oh,
Yeah, so that was something we should have touched on in the very first thing, but we kind of avoided that elephant that's missing, I guess, in this case. So there's manifolds that should be there that are no longer there. Zach, you had some speculation on that of what's going on there.
yeah. So Anthony Gomez down at Rocket Ranch mentioned that he saw a lot of the deluge pieces moving the day before the launch. So that would kind of explain why nobody really got images of them, because it was probably shortly after the road closure started or right before it. So yeah, I mean, it is possible that they just moved them to, if I had to guess, it would probably be the ground fabrication building. So that would be this building over here. So if I had to guess, they're probably inside of that building right now, getting painted again. I don't know. Every time they move stuff in there, it's usually to paint it, but yeah, I guess we'll see if it comes back out here in the next week or so. But I mean, it is totally possible that once they finish whatever they're doing to it right now, that it'll just go straight to the launch complex. But I guess we can discuss that more when we get to the launch complex.
I'm hoping for that direction, because one thing that Nate had said was he saw the word scrap on it. And I'm like, I think that meant from 39A, where they had the old flame diverter system that these went to, and I'm hoping that was the scrap from there that went here. It's like perfect. Like Jax, what were you saying?
Yeah, I was gonna say I do remember there was in red spray paint, big on the side. There was scrap written on at least one of them. I'm not, like you said, I don't know off the top of my head when that was put on. So, but it's an interesting note nonetheless.
Yeah, that is really interesting to consider. I want to bring up a picture of what they look like just so we can um, do some theorizing here. Is theorizing a word? Probably not.
It
Anyways.
is. It is a word. Theorizing is a word, yes.
So one thing I'm thinking could be a possibility, and I don't know if this is the case, but I don't know, with how long these were sitting outside at 39A, I'm wondering if it's a possibility that they were like damaged or something. Um, and so this one right here actually looks really similar to these, even though it's has that 90-degree on the end. So I'm wondering if they're preparing on this to actually turn it into one of these.
Well, I mean, from what we're looking at is that eventually there should be a large water tank that's attached to these. But this was also looking at like the current 4 tanks that exist should basically connect with all of these. And we've already have kind of an idea of where they go and how this all works. But the interesting that interesting thing that just kind of popped up. Remember those blast diverters things that we were talking about before? Those little triangles to the left. Do you notice that they're kind of about the same dimensions as the one to the bottom? And it's like, well, that could work out in an interesting sense. Yeah. So they could be to help for protecting the pipework there. Because
Right.
you're mentioning
So
protecting pipework, and these are obviously elements that stick up a bit higher.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, I wonder how necessary that would be, only because of the reason that uh, it's behind the tower. Like the tower is a pretty good flame diverter.
It absolutely is, but it's just something that kind of piqued my interest when I was looking at this image that we were talking about protecting pipes with that. And that just is an interesting element or thought that it would work, but I don't know how much it would be necessary.
Yeah, it does make sense though, just given the length of it. It does line up like fairly well. I'm going to go back to that other image.
And there's a lot of other things going on here at the Sanchez site that are still pretty fresh and new. And Zach's already headed over here.
Yeah, we have. Uh, I can't even tell. Well, I can't even tell if this is only Mega Bay or if this is Mega Bay and Star Factory steel right here. But we know for sure that this is at least Mega Bay steel. So based on seeing these first sections right here being assembled, and Thomas, you had some ideas on what they were going to be doing with this.
Yeah, so other people brought this up as well, but this should be the L shape that they make the walls. So they will have the corner that they would like to go through and make for um, each of the 4 corners. This would be perfect to go through and make those elements so that you can just pre-assemble these. They've got 2 of them currently, but that way you could make it vertically. So you've got the columns and other things that will be attached to these, and then the rest of the wall structure, and then you can add on all of the extra panels and plates so that it's just on the ground and easier to access. So they'll add like Z-girts, which are just the elements to go across left to right. They already have those over at the Mega Bay site right now, but it's good to see that they have these elements. This is about the right size for doing the corners, and you'll then add basically the additional sections in between. So they'll have these basically be the starting points. And I just really like the idea that right now these will probably head over to the next to the Mega Bay, and we'll get to that in just a bit. But a lot of these elements are already headed over to Mega Bay, and I think it was pretty much at the very end of all of Mauricio's images that he took on the ground images that you can actually see some of these parts headed over that direction, so you can see them out in front of Sanchez.
You said the end.
Yeah, so the very end of all of the ground photos is where it was at, because I think it was on the way back out. He spotted it. Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
By the way, I should mention for anybody who is not already an RGV aerial supporter on Patreon, this week Mauricio took 346 ground images and 251 flyover images. So if you are an RGV aerial Patreon member, you will have access to all of those, and you can look through all of these yourselves. But yeah, as you can tell when I was scrolling through these, it's quite a bit of images.
And
Yeah, so this is
YouTube as well, both Patreon and YouTube.
Yeah, this is the perfect example of what we're talking about. You can see Sanchez just up at the top. You've got the solar panels, so the container wall, and then the rest of this is on basically the flatbed trailers. So they've been pulling this away from the Sanchez site, and some of it's been headed out towards the Mega Bay. But I would also say that a lot of this is still coming in from Roberts Road. So some of this could be Roberts Road right now. But we saw at least two columns. Not sure if those are further to the right. Yeah, it's just two more images to the right, I believe. So we've got that one, and then then there's one more just to the right of that. I think that has the footings. Nope, it's not the one. Okay, can't see it there, but there was another one with footings in it that shows how large they will be, and it fits exactly with the embeds for the bolt patterns and everything else. And it's just really nice to see we're getting Mega Bay that was going to be for Florida. But the question that people are often asking is why that it's here instead of at Florida, because this was at Florida for a lot of these parts. Yeah, that's a perfect view, I think, over at the um, Sanchez site of them pulling parts to be basically just moved over to the other side of the site.
Yeah, I saw this one driving right here. I would think maybe this may be the one you were looking for. Nope.
Oh, I see it. It's the white truck on the left, but I don't see all the embeds, so it's in that same range of pictures probably. Because Mauricio was just going around taking photos, and so I was at the first area of photos, I guess. There we go. That's it. Oh, and it's not the white one; it's the red truck. There we go. That's the white truck. With you can see these massive embeds, and so you're going to have washers and bolts on top of bolts on a system to connect directly to the ground and have everything leveled and perfect. And there's so much craziness going on there.
Yeah, and overall, I think that what we're seeing now kind of makes it pretty clear that it's going to take a lot longer to build this structure than it will the other one, simply because of their limitations on, you know, area that they can actually construct this. So the last time they built the first Mega Bay, they were able to do 4 of these at one time, and they were all in like different stages of completion. So the crane was basically busy like every other day lifting one of these sections. But with the way that they're going to have to do this, it'll basically be limited to doing 2 of them at a time and then actually having to roll them over to the Mega Bay. But I think that may be a temporary situation just for the first few sections. But we'll see that a little bit more once we move. Actually, let's just go ahead and look at it right here. So next to the Rocket Garden and the Mega Bay Foundation is just out of the image over here. But you can see them clearing up this land right here, which I have a feeling may be related to the construction of that building, at least at first. And then after that, I'm hoping or speculating that they may need to actually expand this rocket garden out because they're drastically ahead on manufacturing right now. So I think we'll see this temporarily used for that the construction of that building, but we will find out pretty soon. I mean, they're working pretty quick to get this graded down.
By the way, those Z-girts I mentioned before, just to the left, right there. But one thing that really kind of disturbs me now is like this area was private property. Now it looks like SpaceX has a lease on this property because they're actively working on it, and it hasn't changed property owner. So that's typically indicates a lease has occurred. And the issue is that since this is the last one on Remedios, I have a fear that they could basically go through and ask the county to do an abandonment process on all of the Remedios Road up from the corner of Highway 4 up till here, because they basically have control of all of those properties adjacent to the road here. So that's a kind of an issue that I hope never comes up. I hope they keep the Rocket Garden open so tourists can come up to basically where those red cars are parked. They can basically get out and take some photos, and it's a really cool scene because it's like you can't normally get close to rockets like these, or any rockets really, unless they've been in their own rocket garden. Let's say at like for Northrop Grumman or any of these other sites that are old, used or test rocket model parts that are not functional. These are almost pretty much functional rockets, especially Ship 20 there at the left side. So I'm hoping they don't lock this area down.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it would be even better if they put a visitor parking lot right here.
That would be
That kind of
awesome.
gets people out of the way because, I mean, a lot of people, thankfully, when they visit, are smart enough to park up near the solar panels and then walk down here. Me myself, sometimes I get lazy and end up coming down here, but it's not we're not not supposed to be there essentially. So I to some degree when I am down there though, I feel like dang, we shouldn't even be here. So I wouldn't blame them if they didn't want to sit down there either, if they wanted to close this road off, but it would be unfortunate because it is really nice to be able to get down here and get so close to them and like really really truly see what they look like up close.
Yeah. But at least what we can see that the groundwork that's taking place to the left here, it's good news because we now have the ability to, let's say, build Star Factory parts right here. Those same elements we were looking at would be the part of the foundation footings, and there would actually be footings below them. And this could basically be just road base material with concrete underneath it, and that would just allow them to build up the elements and then basically crane them over onto the building directly from there. And that's a huge part of that process that needs to take place.
Yeah. I think one of the first things they're going to do here is um, probably lay these uh, storm drains down. So I think there's a storm drain underneath this one.
Yep.
Um, and so I'm pretty positive it stops right there right now. So we should probably see them line these up and it'll end up going down here for their drainage, um, which is good. I think there is a current one right here as well too. But if they wanted to expand the rocket garden, they would need to eliminate this right here as well.
Yeah.
Although they wouldn't have to, but it would probably be more ideal instead of having this random what do you call this, a creek almost coming through your you're in the middle of the rocket garden. So yeah, I could totally imagine them expanding this out so that they can get rid of this drainage right here.
Zach, Chicago is creeping in.
Yeah, the fire trucks really never stop rolling here. So, um, but yeah, we also have some other updates. I don't know if you had anything else to add on this, Thomas.
Not an update, but just kind of a minor footnote about the culverts here. So if you go to the left side of the road there and go up, so no, not just this, the same Remedios road we were just on. So go up on the image. So the interesting thing is that the layout is that this is much higher of soil on Remedios, where you see that water. It basically flows upwards on the left hand side, and then it crosses over, and then it flows downward on the right hand side. It's a really weird way that they've got the drainage going, but that's according to the survey maps that I've seen that it's supposed to do it, and it pretty much does. It's higher on the left and then much lower on the right. So that's how their drainage seems to work.
There is one, and I'm going to take back what I said about them eliminating this. So you're saying that this ties into here?
So on the right hand side, you can see that that's where its major, its major outlet is actually at. It's this tiny little outlet, but most of the water goes across the street up further. So it drains downhill, but it downhill goes up, and then it goes to the right, and it goes down. So it's a really weird system. And then there's that other culvert that goes across, and it connects to, I guess, some other stuff at the RV park. That one's a newer one that they've added. It's just interesting.
I guess we're gonna have to keep our eyes on that one. There is another thing I wanted to talk about over here in the Sanchez site, which is kind of a small thing, but it's still interesting. It looks like they started, I'm guessing, moving a lot of the stuff that was out here into this building.
No, it's up to the right is where they're moving a lot
It's
of
all
this.
of
So
this up here.
so you can see all the valves and stuff, and they were continuing to do that. And then you see those black pipes to the left. Mauricio got some ground photos of those. They finally moved. Every week, people are like, "Oh, did they just move the pipes?" And it's every week, no. And this week, it's actually yes. So
Wow.
if you go
So
to the
they did
ground
all of
photos,
that. Yeah, we were wondering how they were going to get those out. So they had to move all of that stuff to get those out.
yeah. And then what looks to be going on, if you actually go down a little bit, it's easier to explain. So on this other side of the tent, they've got all this concrete that they were needed to fill in on the left hand side. Um, that's something that they've already been working on as of Friday afternoon. Mauricio has ground photos of those as well. So those are actually pretty useful because they're a little bit more up to date. That they've basically filled in this side. And what it appears is going on is there are piles of dirt on the other side. So yeah, exactly. Like this is showing currently where all that junk was at. They basically pulled up all the aggregate. They're moving it into a pile. That's pretty usable stuff. And so they can go through and it looks like are potentially doing concrete or some sort of parking lot or something over on this side where all of the inventory was at before that they moved up.
Was there another ground image? Oh wait, here's those two pipes, right?
Yeah, the two pipes. Yeah, they just moved them like 20 feet to the left. But it's funny. We're always like, did they move them? Did they move them? And yeah, they finally did. It's just a
Nothing
rolling
special
joke.
though.
But yeah, go to the right hand side, and you can see what they're doing the concrete here. So actually, just was 2 images over from what you were at. And those ones work too.
Oh, uh,
Yeah, go to the left, and you'll see the workers. Yeah, so yeah, they're there at pouring the concrete. So really getting things ready for additional infrastructure and really having the ability to bring in semi trucks and more. Let's say, what are those racks? No, that's not the right word.
What are you trying to say?
Shelving. Sorry, shelving. They'll be able to do more shelving here as well.
First word is sounds like.
No, shelving. That's the word.
No, I understand. I'm just giving you a hard time, friend. Sorry.
Yeah, sometimes my mind just drops the words, but yeah, they've got plenty of shelving going at the kind of a horizontal direction. They could basically go perpendicular to that as well. So that would be very interesting to really fill in this area.
yeah, that's a pretty long driveway. And also, as you were mentioning, just you could really have rows of shelving in here if you wanted to. But man, I really wish this structure was larger.
Yeah, I'm still hoping that they decide to make a inventory tent part 2 because honestly, they will need it and they already need it right now.
Yeah, agreed. Especially with the expansion of the Star Factory, I feel like it might become necessary rather quickly. But it'll be easy enough to take one of those tents down when they expand the Star Factory in the other direction and put one of those over here. So I guess we'll see if that ever ends up happening. Really quickly, I just realized we are at the just over the 1 o'clock mark in the show. Oh, 1 o'clock our time. But if you guys haven't done so already, do us a favor and hit that like button. We'll see there's about 1,300 of you in here, so thanks all of you for joining us on Saturday. It seems like some people really like Sundays a little bit better, but we really appreciate all of you being here on a Saturday because I know a lot of you like to get out and enjoy the weekends. So thank you for taking this time to be with us and go over all of these updates. And yeah, we really appreciate you helping us out with that algorithm by hitting the like button.
And I've got something for Jax here at the bottom of Sanchez. At the Rocket Garden, do you want to give up the quick update of what is going on there? It's a small item, but still big.
Well, I mean, it's about 50 meters tall, so I'm not sure I'd call it small.
That's why I called it big.
Yeah, so last week I had mentioned that Ship 27 had started shifting around in the bay, and it was looking like they were going to move it soon. Earlier this week they did, and it left the high bay and went off to the Rocket Garden, and you can see it right where Ship 24 had sat. It sat for a few weeks during the pre-flight preparations. So 27, like 26, you can quite clearly see that there aren't flaps or tiles. This will be the last the last vehicle to be like that for now, at least. 28 will return to looking normal. It's unclear why Ship 27 is in the garden. You can take two different approaches. You can take the Doomsday approach, or you can take the it's just standing out of the way approach.
I like
I
that second approach.
Yeah, I'd like to think that it's just sitting there while they work in the high bay, because the second Ship 27 left the high bay, Ship 29 parts started moving in, and they're getting set up to start stacking Ship 29 as early as now.
Well, here's a question: how long had it been in the garden at this point?
That's a good point. It had already been there for a fair few days at this point.
Okay. So with that being said, we've seen the new setup at the Massey site for the uh, this little test rig over here, or whatever. So it would be interesting to see if, you know, the first step for S26 or 7 is to come do cryo testing over here. So
Yeah,
this would
and
allow them to both do the initial cryo test and then puck shucking afterwards. And then they would never need to send it to the launch complex. But
and with 27 at this point being pretty much completed for cryo, it's just wasting space in the bay. So that seems like a fair bet as to why it's there, but I guess it'll become clear in time.
yeah, I mean, that's a good parking spot if you're just setting up to get to move it over to the Massey site, or even honestly to the suborbital site. But I don't know if they can even do this testing at the suborbital site right now. I mean, I think they can do it on pad B, but I believe pad A may actually be damaged right now. So it would make sense that they're not able to do this over there right now.
They need to overhaul Pad A. Pad B's basically been retrofitted and works excellently, or is supposed to, but we've never seen it be touched. So they basically went through, did all these upgrades to make it more robust, and added additional pipe work, and then nothing. We were going to see a static fire, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, I was gonna pull up a picture of the suborbital pad really quick, but let's see here.
But yeah, it was interesting. We talked earlier about Massey's. They pulled the hydraulic rams from Pad A. That's the one that it does need more of those robustness upgrades, I guess you could say, in order to do static fires. And the direction that they're going, it seems to be they want to do static fires only at pads A and B, where the cryo station at Massey's is now taking over in that function. And it also appears that they're going the direction for the thrust, the puck shucker, over at Massey's as well. That's that new stand we talked about earlier. So really, like, there's a lot of changes. So that's pad A, while they still have some of the hydraulic equipment still there.
Yeah, I just noticed that I mean, it looks super rough down here.
I'm pretty sure Booster 7 had something to do with it, because it didn't look that rough before. It's missing railings and things, and yeah, I'm pretty sure concrete went flying. But yeah, speaking of robustness upgrades, it needs some more.
Agreed. But that is brings up a really interesting point, though. Like, only doing static fire testing at the launch site makes a ton of sense. Even for boosters as well too. So, I'm actually a little bit surprised that they haven't started adding the second pad for cryo testing here. So we know that there's going to be one right here. We don't know whether or not they'll be doing boosters, or if it'll only be ships here. I mean, again, I wouldn't be surprised if it's only ships. But yeah, I mean, it seems like by having all of this infrastructure for moving ship testing to Massey's, it would also make sense to do booster testing here. But we're definitely talking about a vehicle that weighs twice as much. So I would understand that they maybe wouldn't want to move 200 tons, or actually, I guess it would be close to 500 tons, or considering the counterweights and all that stuff on the SPMTs down the highway. So,
well, based off of the the size of what it should be at that pad. And actually got something that it's been going around in the circles for
You cut out there,
actual.
Thomas.
Sorry, I'm I'm having to move around to paste it, but you can pull this up if you'd like, and you can show it. It's already out there. But I talked about this this map where it basically shows all of the pads at Massey's. This is, as I said, a bit older news, but it's still very interesting because you can see pad D. If you want to go back down and look at that, it looks a bit thicker as far as to the right for what it would be. But yeah, it does kind of remind me of still like Booster and Starship.
Yeah, because your booster, you would. Well, never mind. I'm looking at the way they have the pipework set up, and it almost looks the exact same as far as where the pipework ends at.
Yeah, and one of the things that is the funniest about this map is like I already figured out that these were going to be like pads A, B, C, D, except there's actually no A. So if you scroll up, there is no A. It's B and then pad B2.
That's annoying.
Yeah.
Interesting. I really wonder what this is supposed to be right here. Just a random thought, but the other thing
probably telecoms or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see the thing for the fluids bunker as well, but does that exist yet? No?
The fluids bunker? What do you mean?
So right here it says fluids and comms bunker.
Okay, well there's already the comms bunker there.
Oh, maybe they'll build a structure over at the top of it?
Well, you can see there's additional tankage or something that's structural going up where it says fluids bunker.
Mm-hmm.
So there is something else that we're kind of missing right there that's currently not at Massey's.
Okay.
But yeah, there's all sorts of interesting elements here, and then one of the other issues is that this is a overlay of like Google Maps on this one, so you kind of get some ghosting effects, if you will.
Any idea what these three things right here are? Oh, that's just the parking area for tankers?
Yeah, that is parking for tankers, and you can see the same thing up above as well. So that one's a bit more defined, and it's not. It's more of a ghosted image. This one's very much strict. Like, okay, these are for tankers only.
Very interesting that these are not included on the diagram at all. So I'm guessing.
Yeah, but interesting enough, there is like where it says Teleco 3. There's something kind of odd there, just to the right a little bit. So you can see quite a bit of lines going through that area. So it looks like either tankage or other things will be appearing in that spot right there where it basically says Teleco 3. Teleco 3 is off to the right, but just underneath that label, there is something that should go there, but it's not showing at present.
Interesting. We'll have to keep our eyes on. What about these little circles over here? Do you know what those are?
That's just ring storage. That's where you're going to be staging rings and test articles. But yeah, it's just one of those things that are interesting. But yeah, let's get back to Sanchez. I know this is interesting, but everything else about it is pretty much something we've already talked about or knew about already.
Well, back at Sanchez. I don't know. I feel like we may have covered almost everything over here. Should we move on to the Mega Bay?
Sure.
Cool. Let's do it.
We have lots of donations if you want to.
Of course. Let's
jump in there. So we got all the ones from when the stream started. Thank you, Mauricio. We'll start off, and we have several in PayPal. So I'll start off with PayPal real fast. We have a $200 donation from Alex H, who was very kind and says that he wants, or she wants 2 flyovers this week, next week. So that being the week coming. So that was very generous of them. We also received a donation from Rob V, who says small donation for the next flight and more likes. Go RGV team. Oh, it's Crane Man. Thanks, Crane Man. Sorry, I didn't see your name in the first place. Hi, Crane Man.
Was it just those two?
Oh, it helps to. No, it helps to push the button. I let go of the button because I let go of the button. Anywho, there are more. $40 donation from Daniel J. $5 donation from Doug T. Pete 2.0 donated $5 and says matching Doug T's donation. Doug T actually said something for gas money, a little bit for gas money. John Dopker donated $5 and says gas money for sure. $5 from Yazada. Also says for more fuel. 55 Chevy Guy donated $5 and says the donation train for fuel and plane costs. Jim Cavett donated $5 and says he's on the gas fund. And $1.99 from Steve Coates, who says choo choo. And then a £2 47 pence donation from Scat 1975. We also have a donation from, we got lots of donations as well. Jessica Kirsch donated $10 and says starting the at Sharpie choo choo train. She started the train. Jim Cavett donated $10, all aboard the Sharpie train. Scat 1975, £2 47, jumping on board. Rip 24/7. John Dopker donated $10 and says I'll hop on board. Steve Coates donated $1.99. Again, choo choo. Oh, I guess those are a little bit of a repetition on that one. Jake Winlow, $10. Let's keep this train rolling. James L, $10. I bet they'll be ready to fly in about 6 months or less. They have a good crew. I agree with that, James. I don't think it'll be more than 6 months that it'll take. I think the gents might be in agreement too. We'll see. And then
6 to 8 months is my minimum.
there you go. And then Michael Maxey came in with $5 and says he came late and he wants to know if there were any updates on the fire at Massey's test site recently. And I told him we didn't know much, but that we were looking at pictures of the fire and then the aftermath. And that's it for the donations.
By the way, thank you for that train. Chugga chugga, woo woo!
Yeah, we greatly appreciate all the donations, and especially contributing towards extra flyovers is always extremely welcome, because you never know when it's going to be necessary to do those. So thank you to everybody, and it also helps support the team as well, because we definitely put a lot of time every week into not only the show and tells that happen both after the flyovers and after ground images, but just in general reviewing images before we get on the show, so we're actually aware of what's happening. So it's definitely quite a bit of a time sink. So we definitely appreciate the support from all of you. And with that, I guess we will continue on.
It also goes towards equipment like the drone, Mauricio's drone. And ideally, eventually, we can talk Mauricio into letting us use the funds to get him a new computer.
Yeah, I think that's another one that's going to be a huge one, because the new computer direction, it makes things faster so we get images sooner, and that's a huge one. Because and even during the show and tells, which everybody who's a Patreon member of 3 and above can join us and watch all of the photos, and we talk about everything and go in depth about it. It's basically like this, but a lot more fun with user interaction from everybody.
And actually, one correction, any Patreon or YouTube member, any level, can join us.
Oh, good. I talked to you about it last time, and you said it was only 1 or 3. So
yes, that's how it used to be. They've opened it up now, so anyone who's a Patreon or YouTube subscriber or member on one of our tiers can join us in both the show and tells. They can join us here during the show, and they can join us in the before and after show.
And you can talk to us directly as well. That's another cool benefit. You can ask questions directly using voice or in chat. But yeah, let's get back to the photos, because I do notice something that's really fun. If you scroll back up, Zach, the bridge crane that they have just installed and painted recently, they added racing stripes. So I'm thinking that's going to go a lot faster.
And do they have 2 of them in here? I forgot.
Yeah, they've got 2 of them in there, 2 bridge cranes. So this is one of the 2.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like this one is functioning now, and they might be up there doing some service on it. But yeah, I mean, it looks like, and actually the work in here has been slightly slow, but I mean, I don't know how high of a priority is for them, but they definitely have their HVAC up there. And as I showed in a few images ago, there are I believe this has been here for a few weeks now, right? But the doors, they cut the doorways, and then they have, I'm guessing these are retractable doorways similar to what's on the outside of the
Star Factory
tents. Yeah, the Star Factory fabrication tents, all of that. So yeah, I mean, this should allow them to move Raptors in and out of here and into the Mega Bay. But I think there's just a little bit more work left this is a great image. A little bit more work left to be done. I think that they actually are probably building a Raptor testing station inside of here, so like pressure testing and all that. And I think this may actually be part of it right here.
Yeah, they've got a bunch of these around, and this would be very useful for that Raptor testing. You can actually see HE, which is helium, fill, drain is FD. So they're going through and testing out this would be Raptors or part of the booster, but Raptor is more likely because you have multiple stations here to test multiple systems.
Could they be used for the tiles as well, or no? Just that only those tile boards we saw that one time.
Oh, the tile boards would be separate from this. So they go through and test out tiles or stuff over at the other side of the site. But yeah, this would be perfect for testing, as Zach said, the Raptors.
I wonder if that QR code would tell you what they would be used for.
Well, they have the same panel inside of the inside of Tent 1, so this is, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this came out of Tent 1, but I think this is actually brand new, because I don't think they would want to shut down that station without having the other one ready to go. So
check the wheels. That's how you can tell if it's new or not.
Right.
They look pretty good, so it's probably new or relatively new.
Yeah, and this is only part of that station because there's a whole platform that they need inside of there as well, which obviously from these kind of angles, we're not really going to be able to tell whether or not they're in there. There is something back there, but I think this is the start of just a shelf or something like that. But
yeah,
can't really see if they have any other stations back there yet. But this is, in my opinion, probably the lesser exciting update for the Mega Bay. Go ahead.
And one other interesting part: white walls. Like it's the elephant in the room. It's white walls, and that's cool because you can actually tell where like you've got grease or parts that have fallen on the floor. They're probably going to do the same thing on the floors. It's probably white floors, just make it look really good in there. Yeah, you can go ahead and move on out. It's just one other.
Is it meant to be nice a clean room?
Not really a clean room, just a cleaner environment that you can actually see where the dirt or the other stuff are at. So a real professional factory, that's what they're basically building here, has white floors, white walls, white ceilings. Just kind of goes with the whole SpaceX vibe as well. And looks like you're taking a nice little screenshot here because you're liking what you see.
Yeah, so this is really good news in my opinion, because this has been here for far too long. But it looks like they will be adding in, I'm going to go ahead and call it, we'll have the first windows up on the Mega Bay by the end of this week. So I think this right here is a little frame section for a window. There's another one right here.
That's the elevator, I thought.
This is the elevator, yeah.
Oh, wow. I see it there, yeah.
1,
on the right-hand
2,
side. That you can...
3, 4, 5 of them. And then when we move over to, it kind of stops right there. But you move over to this side and they start continuing again. And there's actually some fellas up there right now working on something. Tough to tell, but I'm guessing they're probably adding in more of those frames. But yeah, I mean, it is possible that they may actually go through and add all the frames first and then add all the windows. But typically, you're kind of doing both things in tandem because they're two different crews. So yeah, I expect that we will see those windows up there very soon. Oh, look, you got guys up here as well too.
And this is something that we called months in advance. We were like, okay, well, apparently they're not doing the windows now. They're probably going to do it after the first test flight. And that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, immediately. So that is fantastic news. I'm really excited to see the structure once they finally have this off, because I mean, it's been up there for like a year almost, I want to say. Not quite that long, but it's been up there for a very long time. Yeah, so that was the only little update from the Mega Bay that I wanted to touch on. But we can also move over to look at the second one, which will be next up on the list as far as what we're watching out for. This is not the best angle.
Yeah, this rebar is thick. Zach, if you go back to the live comms, I've got a video that you can show real quick that just pulled it off the internet. That's where a lot of this stuff comes from. But yeah, this worker decided to get a quick snap for us to show the structure underneath, and it's just beautiful. Like the amount of rebar that they have here is just incredible. So especially on the other side where you could see the all of the rebar that's basically being laid down, that's even thicker than this stuff here. So like this is the first that was like one of the layers, and they added a final layer up there. You can see it's just incredible, like how much goes into this. So it's like less than 6 inches. Like right there, that's like a foot, but you can see the guys just standing on it pretty much freely, and that is just incredible.
Yeah, that is a lot of steel for sure.
Yeah, we're super jealous, especially Zach at the stage 0 level. Like this is what you wanted for the launch table underneath, and
Right. To be
especially
able
that.
to see that stuff when it's in the process of being constructed. Um, maybe one day SpaceX will put out like a documentary or something just showing all that stuff. I doubt it, but
Do you really doubt it?
yes, I do.
Oh, they're definitely going to do some sort of documentary. I mean, IMAX cameras. We saw some other stuff that we'll get to later, and it's just all sorts of fun that they're really pushing for putting out a nice video or documentary or all the above.
Well, I actually hope so. That'll be amazing. But yeah, we have about what half of this structure done as far as the base goes, and you can see the I think they did this side first, and then they did this side. Um, but yeah, they're probably close to pouring this one right now. It looks like it's nearly complete.
Yeah,
Um,
they did the top right section and then the left section that was the left corner, and then they're going to do from the left corner on down to where you can see that wood going across. That is their barrier.
this
To basically no continue to the right, right there. Yeah, so that's their barrier. That's where they're stopping. So that's where the concrete ends, and then the rebar continues going across, and they're adding additional rebar. So that's going to be the last section that they pour.
Yeah, that is incredible how much rebar that is.
Yeah,
Um,
it takes like 20 hours just for that top right section to be done. There's a pumper truck that was sitting there when they first did that section. That if you zoom out, it's the top right and a little bit of that. It's like an L shaped. Yeah, so that entire side. There's just so much concrete, and at this point, they're doing concrete just for the conduit, and then they put on a red paint or red powder that basically says, "Warning: Do not go any further than this. Do not dig here. There's high voltage going through here."
yeah, I mean it's interesting because I'm almost surprised that this wasn't here before. Like because they pre-planned out a lot of the stuff that they were going to have here. So the fact that they're doing this now to me almost seems like this this whole structure is a reaction to not having their facility and not being able to use their facility in KSC. Um, but that's just my speculation on that. But I mean, they're definitely moving quickly to get all this stuff down here, and I mean, beyond that, they've completed the all of the or most of the drainage. So they ran 3 sets of culverts down here, um, which are you can see the grading right there where the drains will be, and I think they turn over just a little bit, so they have to make a little bit of a turn right here, all 3 of them, and then they come straight through here and into the rest of the build site. And I think we have a better image that shows where it ends up at because they're doing a lot of work on there. That's not the angle we want. Yeah, there's that.
Yeah, but overall, the direction with the KSC side that you mentioned with Mega Bay, I think it's interesting is that they're reallocating their and reprioritizing their resources to Starbase to be their prototype factory, their prototype developments of the vehicles. And once they are ready, I think they will then copy that production line over to KSC. So once they are completely set with the Star Factory and everything else, Mega Bay is part of that. And they literally took the Mega Bay from Roberts Road at Florida and brought all the pieces here that were never assembled. They were just sitting around for ages and were all like, what's going on? And it's really just a dedication to Starbase right now and basically making it a full production facility.
Yeah. And one thing I was thinking here, just going back over to the Mega Bay, was that part of the reason to have this drainage here, well, obviously to lay down a concrete pad next to this, but also I was thinking that they may need to actually be able to get a crane through here, but I don't know if you'd want to bring a crane on top of this.
It would basically be an issue of potential soil collapse or collapse of the stuff below if you're too thin. But if you actually go back to the images kind of further down, you basically can see there's a little bit of a green piece it's a nice little wedge where water accumulates. It's up the top right there. Yeah, they can fill all of that in now. So that's a huge element that because they've got the culverts in here, they're going to put concrete to basically this side to that side. That could be all filled in too. And that's actually a huge part because if you have your factory basically locked, landlocked from both sides, it really kind of messes things up. So being able to move rings or components or whatever else, or just have storage in this area would be very useful.
More room for activities.
Exactly. And Jax, you want to take over for the ring yard, because that's a huge area that we can talk about, or you can definitely talk about, because it's a lot of stuff going on in the ring yard and in the high bay and mega bay here.
Yeah, I'll take you through what sort of the activity that's been going on this week. Not really too much to speculate about at the moment, but let's take a look, shall we? So if I think right out front of the mid bay, there's one of the new elliptical domes, the smooth stretch formed panel domes, sleeved inside of a touring section. It's unclear exactly what that's for. I would waver a guess that it's for a test tank of some kind, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. The Ship 22's nose cone is off to the upper left of it. You can just see the curved portion of it in the mid bay. That recently, I believe yesterday or so, that left the mid bay. Oh, it's in rough shape. So Ship 22 was scrapped earlier this year, and the nose cone's been piece by piece having parts stripped out of it. Yeah, it's not in great shape. I believe, I don't think it was out when Mauricio got photos, but Kevin Randolph, Chief, put some photos on Twitter. And yeah, it's not in fantastic shape. I can't remember if Starship Gazer did.
Which nose cone is that again?
That's Ship 22's.
Okay.
Gazer did get those as well.
And then Jax, you said yesterday or earlier today that was nose cone 21 is another way to describe it, because Ship 22 was also Ship 21, 22, 23, and it almost got like I think the engines from 20. It was the Frankenrocket.
Yeah, that nose cone's had quite a life, and it's a husk of what it used to be. Most of the internals appear to be gone.
It seems like it's basically a part donator. So the flaps from basically 22 here, the forward flaps and the aft flaps, are being used on other ships now.
Yeah, and I think over by Tent 4, I think we should have an aerial shot of that. The aft flaps from Ship 22 are now... Yeah. Yeah, there we go. The aft flaps from Ship 22 are there, and those have been refurbished, and they should be going on to Ship 28. They did the same thing with the forward flaps, and those have already been installed on Ship 29's nose cone. One of the things I did notice is that the aero covers that go between the flap and the hull of the ship, those are missing now, so probably gone off for tiling inside of the tent. So I'd imagine we're going to see those come out soon, and they'll be able to get the flaps on. I guess we can go back over to the ring yard and talk about what's been going on there a bit. Yes, so Ship 29's nose cone is right there. That's recently moved into the high bay for stacking. It looks like they tried to stack it last night, but they didn't, or something of the sort. I'm not sure what happened, but it was being lifted around last night at least.
With the 2-point way or the regular way with all the different lifting points?
No, they used the lifting squid with the 6 points. We'll talk about that 2-point thing in a second because that was rough. If we go down a little bit, there are multiple pieces of Booster 12 awaiting assembly. Booster 11's methane tank included, I should say. There's a Booster 4 dome off to the left. I believe that'll be for Booster 14. A ship 4 dome just to the right of it. That should be for ship 30 or 31.
Even though there's a dent in it? They'll reuse
dents
it?
will pop out.
Okay.
I've seen a lot worse than that on these things. But yeah, overall, still working very far ahead in the vehicles. This week was a nice step back into doing getting the vehicles assembled. I believe Mauricio in his ground shots, he got a photo inside of Tent 1, and you can see a booster header tank. It was towards the end of his photos. And yesterday I put a tweet out on the Ring Watchers account, and I said that they moved the engine section of Booster 11. It's a bit further to the right. I think it's right at the end. No, like the other side of Tent 1. It's all the way at the end.
It's my last image right here.
It's out of order.
Go backwards.
Who cares? Either way, they moved the engine section of Booster 11 to the Mega Bay for integration with the liquid oxygen tank, which was pretty cool. Normally, those trail behind and delay work on the booster, but they're making good headway. It's interesting.
Is it the one right in the center there with the white little
no
stand going up? Okay.
I feel like I'm missing images here. Sorry.
We've got hundreds of images, almost like 500 images, so you could be missing 1 or 2. Oh yeah, it's 500.
93, 94, 93
but the
or
booster
94.
header tank was right here. I think this one.
Yeah, there it is. So that I believe is the aft section of Booster 11 in Tent 1. You can see the liquid oxygen header tank front and center right there, and that exit out the top is the methane transfer tube, the downcomer that connects to the big methane tank up top. So that's actually already been stacked with the LOX tank, and it's interesting to note because the first flight test of an integrated Starship was a week ago now, over a week ago, and they are proceeding with stacking of questionable components of the booster. But I shouldn't say questionable, parts that were surely still uncertain, because doing a full duration burn with super heavy is still something they haven't done all 33 engines or 30 or whatever it was during the flight test. But I would say this is probably a good indicator that nothing super major was obvious during the flight test, because they are proceeding with stacking that into the newer boosters. The methane tank of Booster 11 is yet to be started in terms of stacking, but that's going to take no time. They can probably have that thing fully assembled in 2 weeks. That's an easy thing to do.
Is this an Elon 2 weeks or reality 2 weeks?
I'd like to think it's a reality 2 weeks, but who knows? In the lower left of this photo, you have a booster thrust dome. I believe that's for Booster 15. I need to fact check that. It might be 16s, but it's hard to tell. Probably 15. Yeah, overall,
it could be both for all we know. 15 and then 16.
That would be seriously concerning.
That means they skip a booster or kind of do the Frankenrocket version of the boosters.
Oh, but either way, yeah, good progress on the vehicles. They're not slowing down. Even though the flight test did end in explosion, they're setting up for as far as the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh flight tests. Like, vehicles, I don't think are going to be the holdup for now, at least.
Blame it on stage 0.
Yeah, stage 0 decided to not do its part.
And more
I shouldn't
so,
say that, but
we don't blame it on stage 0. We blame it on the concrete.
yeah. Out in the, if we look at a ground shot of Ship 28 in the high bay, that was a topic this week because they tested out the brand new 2-point lifting jig.
We should have a
So
video of that, right?
we might.
Yes.
But essentially what this thing does is it uses the 2 load-bearing points beneath the forward flaps of the ship, and instead of using the 6 crane hooks on top, it lets them just use these, so you don't have to tile areas later on. They tried it. They lifted the ship, and it moved. It lifted. Everything after the lifting is where it got hairy, though. It did appear as if they had trouble getting it off. I know I saw one side of it swinging around pretty hard, and it hit Ship 28, and you can see the results of that here. So it's not looking too pretty. It's kind of annoying, I'd imagine. But what you gonna do?
Only annoying to the
What's done is done.
tilers and those who
Yeah.
watch. I have a question. Jax, remember we saw the, well, I don't know if you saw them. I'm sure you did. We saw the nose cone with the lift handles that are literally like lift handles. You know what I'm talking about? Like door knockers almost, they look like. Do you know what that is or what that is for?
Sorry, where at?
I will find you the photo.
All right. But yeah, I mean, it's still questionable what part. I mean, going back to Booster 11, it raises questions. There's still a question, I'm sure, for SpaceX of what worked and what didn't. But seeing parts still being worked on is hopefully reassuring that their designs are holding up. It was just Booster 7 that didn't do its job. And yeah, Ship 28 should be the one flying with Booster 11 as of now, which is exciting. I don't know. I don't know if I have much more to cover. It's been an exciting week. I know I sound super excited.
Well, I guess one thing that I wanted to ask, so you mentioned, having stacked booster 11 on top of its aft dome, and this is the first time they've done that before having the methane tank stacked, right?
Off the top of my head. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you feel is the significance of that?
This feels more efficient. The liquid oxygen tank after the aft section goes on is there's still a lot of work to be done. You have to get various pipes installed, everything welded together, the COPVs, the chines, whatnot. So if they get this aft section on, and you can have one part of the booster team working on getting it outfitted with auxiliary components, you can have another team working on the methane tank, and hopefully both of those sections are completely finished by the time you're ready for mating. And that is efficiency. Booster 10 wasn't. Booster 10 was more like Booster 8, where the LOX tank trailed behind. The aft section was inside of the tent for over half a year. I think it was well over 200 days. So this just overall feels better in terms of the production efficiency, which is something that if they want to build these things as fast as they can, they need to get that worked out.
Yeah. And I just found that video, or actually, sorry, Andy or Thomas uploaded it. So we can go ahead.
These are from Vix. We all love and know her. Able to grab the there's 2 of these of the lift of the 2-point lift system in action. So it just acts kind of like a normal lift. And then the second video is it just moving it with the bridge crane horizontally, and that's kind of an interesting view.
Downloading the second one here. That's what that little blip was there.
Okay.
Let's see. I don't know if this is the right one.
Yeah, that's the second one. Perfect. But yeah, she creates amazing clips, puts them on Twitter, and she does amazing work. Very attentive.
Counts all the trucks that come in. Does a daily report. She's amazing. She catches everything too. She is very much an eagle eye.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah,
she's
I mean,
taking a break this weekend. Go ahead.
it was nice to be able to see them finally use that. It kind of sucks that they didn't, that it didn't like. I mean, it definitely worked, but I guess you know you're just saying, Jax, that the actual decoupling part was where the issue occurred, right?
It looks like it. I mean, they tried to get it off, but then they had to pull over one of the little LTR 1220 cranes, a little telescopic crane to basically disassemble it midair.
Oh wow. Well, that's never good. Um, I mean, I'm guessing there's some pretty tight tolerances when you're working in this area, so hopefully it's just simple as making a little bit of a correction to that. But yeah, I mean that's tough because I guess the good thing is at least they didn't remove the upper lifting points, right?
Yeah. One thing I like kind of going through and knowing how these work and how it appears it's supposed to work, there's supposed to be, like, from what I can observe, a bar that goes across the backside of it so that you could basically prevent it from turning. That's the issue, that it may have be on this side that it turned. And so now you've got basically the whole thing stuck because it's rotated in that socket, and it's not supposed to rotate in the socket, at least not in that direction. So I think that's part of the issue, is that instead of having the two of them locked together and preventing either of those from rotating, I think it rotated and got locked into place there.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll see them reassemble it later and actually be able to use it I don't want to say properly, but without issue.
Well, I mean, that's properly.
Well, I think we should take a chance to answer some questions. I think Andy said that we had a bunch of them stored up, so let's go ahead and do that, and then we will talk about the Star Factory after and move to the launch site after that.
Before we jump into that, I'm just going to jump in. We just got a few more donations, and I'll just quickly do that while Mauricio's getting his questions prepped. We have a $10 donation from James Cabot, who says RGV Computer Fund. And then we have donations from Sharpie for $5, $10 from Cranky Old Man, another $5 from Michael Maxey, and we will rock you. Great name. We will rocket you. Donated $9.99 and says, appreciate all the work y'all do in getting these images to us and the info. And we also want to welcome our new member, Sheldon Rigsby, to the RGV aerial team. Welcome. And now Mauricio.
All right, yeah, so we have a few questions. First one's from Marek Muller. Couldn't they have put where did the campers go? So Marek is referring to the campers that were behind the
Mega
high
Bay.
bay. Yeah, and I think they moved over to the or by San Martin, I believe.
Well, one thing that was interesting, they had a laser show going on before they did their event, which was on Sunday the 16th, and then 17th they were expecting to launch. But the best part about it, the laser show said, "Hey everybody, the launch is at 4:20." Just kidding, and it's 4:17, and it actually was 4:20. So the humor of things is always something you have to look out for, because the humor turns out to be correct sometimes. But yeah, there's the trailers, the Airstreams that Mauricio was talking about over at San Martin. That's on the left, and that's the new area for basically the village for the employees. So AstroTurf, and it's kind of an Astro Village in essence.
I do remember them putting that sign up on there. I think I was with Mauricio when we saw that. And I remember just thinking like, wait, why do they do that? I just felt like they kept giving so many signs that it was going to be on 420.
Well, Elon, it's one of his fun numbers, but I mean, did it really work out on 420? I mean, it had nothing to do with the date, but luck said, maybe, maybe not. It's always the
Maybe it would have
question
went
that
better on the 17th. Is that
well,
what you're saying?
yeah, maybe. So Elon's always had the question if 420 is a lucky number or an unlucky number, because it's got 42 in it, but it also has other meanings, and it's always interesting. But yeah, let's go through and get some more of those questions in, and then we can go over a little bit about Star Factory here.
All right, the next question is from Ernest. Would the new Mega Bay be white? I'd assume they'd be the same color, right, as the High Bay and the Mega Bay.
The interior materials will be white, but it probably is going to be exterior cladding, which will be gray. So it'll kind of have an interesting mix and match, and maybe they'll go through and paint the insides to be white as well, but the outside would be gray. That would be an interesting direction to go.
All right, the next question is from Hiccup. What's the timeline for when the current Mega Bay gets finished?
Well, we still haven't finished Mega Bay 1 quite yet, but we're working on that side with the windows right now. So what do you think, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, the last one took roughly 9 months, I believe, to complete. So, considering that this one is probably going to go a little bit slower, I would assume that it'll probably take just about a year. But you never know. I mean, once they end up, and I'll move over back to that side. Let me grab this image. This will be a better one.
I'll raise you 8 months. I'll go to the lower end here.
Oh wow. I mean, that would be interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think once this area right here, if their desired pre-assembly area, like once this is complete, they may actually be able to move faster than they will be if they continue to do all of the prefab at the Sanchez site. But ideally they would want to do all of that right in here. But then you have activity at the Mega Bay. It's not really necessarily the greatest place to be doing construction at. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents on that. I feel like it may take upwards of 9 months, probably closer to a year. But I guess we'll let's say 429. I'll have Siri remind me to talk to Thomas about this in 8 months. Siri's actually, I shouldn't have said her name. Anyways,
Jax, what do you think? What's your crow on for Mega Bay and when it's going to be complete here, or the second Mega Bay?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one because it depends on if things come up that halt work on it, but probably a similar timeline to the first. Hopefully, I'd imagine, given that it's not their first rodeo, they might be a bit faster, but who knows? Probably a year before it's fully online. Though it also, the way I look at it too is Mega Bay wasn't finished until very recently, the first one, because they only just now got the second turntable set up, and that really made it special.
I guess the question would be to narrow it down. At what point in months would you say would the Mega Bay be functional so you can put stuff in it? It's a building, it has lights, it has electricity, all the extra accessories. That's I guess another question too. But
yeah, hopefully by the end of this year.
Yeah, I mean, here's another thing to consider about that one is that unlike the first one where they really needed it operational so they could start stacking boosters, like right now they're already able to do everything they need. They just want more space to do it. So I have a feeling that they probably won't actually use it until all of those workstations are in there because they have no like true need to use that building yet. So when it gets to that point, I feel like they may go ahead and outfit the interior all the way and then start moving stuff in there. But maybe we'll talk about it in a year.
all right, can we move on, or do we have more questions?
Just one last question before we move on. One question from Shao. Do you think maybe permit requirements at KSC required a redesign of the Mega Bay structure, hence the delay and then relocation to Boca?
I think it's just a reallocation of resources to Boca because what I think is going on is they want to get a full production line going for the Star Factory, for the Mega Bays, and they want to basically go through and replicate that to Florida once that has been completed and is in a functional process with a functional Starship and booster. So not a lot of R&D would occur at Roberts Road. It's going to be all in Boca. And so one of the other elements that we keep hearing over and over again is that they would like to launch the starships from Starbase. We want to see them, or we've heard that they want to launch them at Florida. So Florida is really ground to a halt, or not really a halt, but slowed down considerably. So there are still contractors doing work, but it looks like it's just finishing up work they were already paid for. Star Factory at Florida is still has work ongoing, but it's like electrical, AC, just things that are already were planned and scheduled and need to happen. So if they get bridge cranes installed, everything functional and ready to say, okay, now that we've got all of this ready, what are the tooling is where it is going to be at, and what are we going to have for tooling, just to confirm, because you don't want to make the same mistake twice at the same time. You would rather make the mistake once and then fix it and then move on and replicate the good result at Florida. Zach, what do you think?
Sorry, I had to step away for a brief second, so I didn't hear the question. What was it?
The question would be, why they had Florida. Was there permit issues? Was there structural issues? I guess the direction that the question was asking.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess in my opinion, it just doesn't make sense to build out everything in Florida because they can't launch down there. So, that alone just makes it a waste of capital expenditures when you're building something that you can't use. I mean, they have the entire, well, I guess it's not necessarily the entire Star Factory, but at least section 1 of the Star Factory, I guess we can call it, or what's the correct term for it?
If you want to bring up the PDF, I guess we can talk about it now. So we'll just jump right into the Star Factory. It's not the same question.
Phase 1 of the Star Factory down there is complete, but they luckily haven't started on phase 2. And so now it looks like they are doing all of that at Starbase instead, as far as putting most of their resources there, as Thomas was mentioning, and that includes expanding this Star Factory. So,
by the way, we still see the same Star Factory. Do you have the PDF to show real quick?
Oh, I was gonna, just give me 1 second. Okay. So we have just this little expansion that's coming out here right now. Actually wondering if it's going to come out a little bit further, because when we look out the plans for this is actually for Roberts Road.
But they're clones of each other, basically, yeah. So the left-hand side where his mouse is at, that's the phase 1. That's the current, basically, footprint of the Star Factory at Roberts Road. Then to the right, there is phase 2, but it doesn't say phase 2, but it's basically future expansion. We're already doing that, like future expansion phase 2 here locally at Starbase without fully completed phase 1. Because Starbase has got some interesting issues. It's a full production facility where they are building all the components. They already have part of it. So it's the top of that is basically what we're looking at would be the current Star Factory. So they're going to basically do a similar approach, I suspect, of a large Star Factory on the left, which would go all the way to Highway 4, which would be basically at the bottom in this image. And the right-hand side is where we just saw all of those holes in the ground. So the holes in the ground are for the columns. So we can jump back to that if you'd like. And those columns will be probably for something a little bit beefier, because their footprints are just a bit bigger than what we have currently for Star Factory on the phase 1 side, which is on the right. But then there's another element that's really interesting. And I talked a bit about this last week as well. So what this would be is called a press pit. So a press pit would be where you go through and stamp your materials, you can form materials. It wouldn't really be for stretch forming or anything like that, but it would be to mass produce parts. So for instance, stringers, they use a lot of stringers. So if they're making them themselves, they could sit there and pump away at making lots of stringers instead of having them shipped in, or other components. They can basically go through, as long as they can change out the dies, they can change to newer ones. But yeah, it's a very interesting process that you can see the footprint size. It hasn't quite gotten all the way over to the press pit, but it should encompass this as well, because press pits are usually machinery that you don't want to have out in the open because it's pretty expensive. You'll have strong foundations and other footings. So that's one thing that we should be looking for next, is additional foundations and footings. Because right now they basically shored up the walls to protect themselves from cave-ins and things like that. Even though they've got sheet piles in there, which helps prevent some of that, you want additional shoring up of the structure. And that's what you see with those beams going across, and then those diagonals as well. But the exact component of what we are going to see there, it's still kind of a mystery. But press pit is the answer so far. It's very much a manufacturing thing that they will do. Tesla, for instance, has a bunch of different press pits for different components, but the major one that's a what was it for casting, that single pour casting process that they have, very similar. But this one's not going to be for a single pour press casting of Starship components, I suspect. So it'll be interesting to see how this grows and develops. But as you can see, they already have quite a bit of conduit down that Zach's got his mouse over. They've already buried it. And if you go over to the right a little bit, you can see there is the cryogenics that are not cryogenics, but those tanks. So that's like argon and other gases that they have as commodities. It used to be around the other side of the corner, but they moved it over here. So this was a very much an intentional move to basically relocate all of their components so that they can continue using the Star Factory as it is, and expand out here. And I kind of suspect one thing we'll see is that everything in tent 1 and 2 will kind of go here, and they will have additional facilities like that press pit that will be very active. And that way they can take down tents 1 and 2 and then continue basically building. And then they will have the ability to take down tent 3, which is where their nose cones are at, because that'll be in that section that's replacing tents 1 and 2. So I guess if you want to find a more zoomed out version, you can kind of show the tents real quick. And up above is tents 1 and 2. And then below that is tent 3. That's the nose cone. So they'll switch around the nose cone to be towards Highway 4. That's the direction they're going. And I still hope that they put windows on the front of it so we can see the nose cone slowly moving by every once in a while. It's like, oh my gosh, we got another nose cone, another one. And that's how you're going to be pretty much counting starships, is by the nose cones eventually. So Jax, what do you think on that one? And it sounds like you needed to run here as well.
Yeah, I'm going to head out and just right now. So I'm not going to give my input, but thank you for having me. And bye, everybody.
Bye, Jaxie. Thank you.
Well, I hope you. It sounded like you were getting pretty hungry, so maybe you're now hangry. You don't want to give any input, but
Don't strip the man of all of his knowledge. He needs some secrets for himself.
True.
Well, I guess maybe we can move forward, since we're at about the 2:00 hour right now. I haven't really seen much action over here in the ground fabrication area. Thomas, have you noticed anything?
A little bit. Interesting. Go to the left. We have a lot of cleanup operations going on here. So they're maybe moving house a little bit. So something interesting is going on there, as well as all these steel drums. Those have appeared. And then there's these white columns just above them. Might be part of Star Factory, or I'm sorry, the Mega Bay, but it could be for something else. But they're just above those drums. So they're just interesting little square tubes. Other than that, nothing really super interesting. I guess you could say to the right that there was additional 1/3 circle pieces for building out rings and stands for boosters and starships to move around the rings. That's been pretty neat. Water tanks just to the right of that, but those ones are really weird. It's like, I don't think the houses in the village need those, or at least that much. So maybe it's more of an industrial process where they need water jet cutters and a lot of them or something. But yeah, otherwise, not much new.
Cool. Well, let's just make sure there's nothing new at the village. I'm pretty sure there was actually nothing. Oops, hold on. Nothing on this side of the facility. I guess they're clearing out some more area over here, just for probably more housing, I'm assuming.
Yeah. And then the
wait.
other thing is new housing.
They didn't remove any of the solar panels, did they?
No. They've just cleared out the land portion right there. So you've got a couple of different property owners, and the ones on the left of either leased or sold. And yeah, it's just really neat to see that the village is growing. The number of homes are being built. You've got two more just to the right of where your mouse was just at, right there. Yeah. But yeah, normally we don't focus on like what's in there. It's just the number of homes is increasing. That's really neat.
And we have nothing over here, so let's go ahead and move over to the launch site.
Just missing stuff, and it's pretty much at the launch site, so we're good there. Those are going to head back over to the launch site, those pipes or those canisters.
Oops. Sorry.
No, you're fine. The same canisters are pretty much right there, the black ones. So it's just more of the same.
Yeah, and so we still have not seen Marvin raise back up. Not really sure why that is. I'm guessing they're probably still doing some inspections on this. When I was down there, I actually took a bunch of pictures of it to see if I could just notice anything about it. But in general, overall, this area was really a great place to have this crane because there was really no debris over here for the most part. It really kind of started over in this area where, because of the legs of the launch mount, it kind of guides everything away from this little cone right here, I guess you can call it. So like I said, we haven't really seen much action over here, and they're really mostly just focused on the orbital side of the pad. But what was over here, actually, we do have a lot of damaged material. So we have, and let me get a better angle of this, actually.
Do you remember those things that were on fire that were at the launch pad? And well, I think we're seeing in that pile some of it. It looks quite singed.
Yeah, this one's definitely torched. This one looks slightly burnt too, but I think this is the one that was the post-fire after the launch. But I'm assuming all of these are now scrapped. They look pretty beat up. I mean, these two actually don't look that bad, but just given that it's located with all this other stuff, I'm assuming that they're probably out of action now. Man, this building right here, though. I hope there was nothing too important in there because there's a lot of shrapnel that went straight through the roof of this thing.
Well, luckily the roof slowed it down a tiny bit.
That's a plus. And so where were the press cameras located again?
Go up a little bit.
In front of Poppy.
Yeah, just right along where the guardrail used to be, right in there. That's where they were.
And
I still don't think they've gotten access to those cameras because they just kind of disappeared.
well, and the piece that fell off of where the cameras were attached to, like SSG had his camera attached to the railing, was right in front of those steps, and that was the piece that blew off.
Did SSG or anybody else get their cameras back from this? Because I hadn't really heard much about that, but
not to my knowledge. The only thing we know is that they've requested them to send photos of their rigs.
Oh, that's not good.
So the update on that is we haven't heard anything as far as just because of John Krause reached out to me, so he doesn't know where his camera's at. So he's kind of been trying to get any news possible on that particular area. But yeah, I don't think anything survived, honestly. If anything, like you talked about on the last live stream, I mean, if anything, the SD cards might be salvageable. And that's about it.
Did you have any cameras there, Mauricio?
No, I didn't have anything there.
Smart man.
I thought you were going to put a GoPro there. I mean, that I saw a few of those in there. It's like, okay, whose GoPro is whose? But otherwise, it was a very cheap solution because it is a throw location. And well, they did have to throw away quite a bit, as you could see in that pile. So hopefully no SD cards that are still salvageable ended up there. But who knows?
I just still don't understand why they even approved this area in the first place for that, because even if the concrete hadn't blown out, like this still wouldn't be a good spot.
I think it's because Hoppy was a good spot for camera angles. It was already one that's a known angle, and it was one that SpaceX liked, so they decided to open it up. That's my feeling on the subject, but obviously it really didn't work out super well on that, because there's no like, let's say, dirt or anything else to reduce the impact speed of projectiles that are just sliding across the concrete there. Whereas, let's say, at the sand dunes, where they can't really set up cameras, but SpaceX does own some property over there. Um, that might have been an interesting location choice, or just across the road from Highway 4. Same thing there. But again, the concrete just flying everywhere. It was pretty much like mortar shells coming in everywhere. It was pretty bad. So you'd still have hit and misses for concrete on cameras. So if you go up to the left, you can, I think, 3 images to the left is actually another one. You can see this was where, just at the top here, um, this was where all the cameras were located for the second part of the site. So Rover 2 was sitting here. NSF's van was sitting here. It got demolished on NSF's van, so you can see that from Rover 2, and specifically the VR cam. And it was quite a impactful show. And unfortunately, there was photographers that didn't receive any footage or anything for their destroyed cameras, because it just took out everything, the SD card included.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, this is I think this is a good spot, like on a normal launch, I would say. Probably
Yeah.
not going to have too many issues here. Still probably get a pretty big heat wave that travels through here, but that's not really a huge deal, I don't think. Um, but right here on the pad in that area is definitely, in my opinion, not a very good spot just in general. But um, yeah, I mean, it's really wild to just see finally with a clear view what this building right here in particular looks like from above. And this was their break room, right?
So that's the bathroom right there. It's not really the break room, but the bathroom is, so you can see the water. That's the black containers to the left, and then the sewage is probably to the right. Then there's a pump house just to the right of that. That's a shipping container. Uh, that pump house is for water that goes from Hoppy to the suborbital. I'm sorry, the landing pad. So that's where the pump house was for that. And technically, Hoppy is still an active water tank, as far as I know. It has an outlet to the outside of the shipping container wall that is for emergency use. And so, unless they patch that up and say, nope, we don't have an emergency use here, which I think they are required to have at least one, Hoppy is still used in that sense, in that capacity. It should have water in it still. And you can actually see there's kind of puddle forming just at its right leg there. And even in the back, there's a little bit of puddle. So
That's
it's,
probably just from rainwater, right? Because they had a few storms this week.
well, this was before. I guess you could go up above. You could see there's quite a bit of water up there. So yeah, it's probably from a storm. But I've seen plenty of water just stagnant there, even when there's no rain. So I think it could be both.
Yeah, I mean, this right here. Oh, okay. So the damage to this building may not have actually been as bad as it looks. I think there's, well, I mean, it's definitely bad, but I mean, as far as this right here, uh, it looks like this is actually bent outwards and whatnot. So I think they're actually stripping off all the siding on it.
Oh yeah, I mean it's basically, that is the damage, because you have to remove that in order to access what's underneath, to replace it, or just be able to put up new paneling. So that is the damage. It's just they're doing more damage to, or what looks to be more damage to replace the damaged areas. And look at that, just to the left, you can see like the gutter just absolutely destroyed, as well as that AC unit. And yeah, those are not just bowling ball,
Super
but
large one
larger.
came through here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it hit that shipping container as well, at going at those angles. It probably
Mhm.
went outside of the building, went inside, and then hit the corner of the building, and the shipping container was probably next there. So lessons learned. Fondag for your surface structure, even just for one launch, was not adequate enough, and I believed that it would be, as well as SpaceX, because they went through and did the test anyways with just that, and they were going to change over to that new system right after.
Yeah, I thought it was going to work out as well too. I mean, uh, I guess before they switched out the Fondag, I didn't think it was going to work, and then I figured that, with that there was probably some good calculations that went into that choice. You know what I mean? So definitely unfortunate that it ended out the way it did. But as we move on here, we'll see that they are well in the process of cleaning up from everything and trying to get back to operational or full operational status. And I guess we can move over to the orbital tank farm, where there's a little bit more for us to see over here. So again, we have more damage up to the front right here. The guard shack survived pretty well. I think that's actually behind a leg. Yeah. So this leg right here is
And
good.
that berm helped a lot as well. So concrete and stuff would hit it, and it would try to go at, let's say, an angle, and it hit the top of the berm. So it stopped a bit there, but it didn't stop everything, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, I think as far as the tank farm goes, the worst of it was in obviously the backside. So um, by
This looks
now,
just fine right now, but it's bad.
yeah. I mean,
More you angle it.
look at this. I mean, you could just see the way that the that concrete block that came through here. So they actually already removed the concrete block that was on top of this. It looks like it came and slammed down on top of this and then ended up resting over here. And these are obviously some really strong tanks, I guess, that they could take an impact like that and still be. I'm guessing they're probably dented, but I mean, as far as we can tell, they haven't started to remove anything yet. But the fact that they didn't explode is a good thing. Because
Yeah, real
well,
good thing.
yeah, I mean, these aren't the ones that we have to worry about exploding. It's actually these two over here.
Those are the methane ones.
Yeah, so these are the methane ones, and they are also behind a. Okay, let me get another angle. So yeah, those are also behind one of the legs. So great job on planning that out. I don't know if it was part of the plan or if it just worked out that way that the methane canisters are behind the leg, but either way, great design in order to keep those things safe. Um, but on the back side of the tank farm in here, we still do have some damage back here. So it looks like there was a cable tray that came. Actually, there was two of them, I believe, that came all the way through here, and there's one that goes in here too. I'm gonna have to get a better angle on that.
Yeah, they're pretty much just gone.
Yeah, they're gone.
And then if you go to the right, there's actually even more debris. You could see concrete still just
Wedged in
parked
there.
right there. Yeah, because it basically went in between the tanks, and things were getting taken out left and right. So that's pretty unfortunate there as well.
Ricochet.
This down here is the
Yeah.
thing.
It did ricochet quite a bit.
It did, and you can see it ricochet it with the dents in the tanks.
Yeah, so the one big element, like all of this is easily replaceable. It's ground level, relatively easy. The one thing that's still a big question is that tank on the right. Not those two. Those are, pretty much okay in a sense, but it's that one hole just to the left a little bit. So my speculation is a piece of rebar, like an arrow, went through the outer shell and then into the inner shell because it was leaking. You could see quite a bit of gases coming out, and then they went through and drained out the lock side of the fuel farm, and I'm pretty sure it was like this tank because they don't want just a high oxygen environment present when they're doing construction work or anything that's, let's say, hot work. So they had to get rid of that.
Did you see the SSG photo of that specific spot?
That specific spot from Starship Gazer, I've seen quite a few different photos, but
he has a close-up of it. That's
why. Do you have it available?
I shall get it for you right now.
Okay, thank you. But yeah, this one was the one that was venting, or one of these might not be this specific one, but one of these had a hole that you could see venting from it.
This hole right here.
Yeah. But okay, so the issue is that you have to go through and mitigate it. So one simple solution might be they put up some scaffolding all the way up to that spot. Then they go through and cut out a manhole to access it at that location so that you can go through and put in basically some bracing to allow you to prevent like the internal insulation, which is the Martite. What is that?
Martite and perlite.
Perlite. Yeah, Martite's the other stuff. Oh boy. So that's Starship Gazer zoomed in shot. That is oh so impressive. Um, wow. But yeah, so that if they go through, cut out a hole here, access it so that they can basically protect the pearl light that's existing, you remove just that little bit. So let's say put in planks going directly to that inner shell while they go through, and also put in some, what is that called? Scaffolding from the outside in to brace it. And then they could do basically some hot work on that where they go through and patch up that hole. The one question is, how do they get in or get out any of the let's say debris like the rebar that I think went in there? Because something went in and it obviously didn't quite come out, unless it already did. It was maybe attached to the concrete, so it had a bit of a mass on one end. That could be one thing that happened, but I would doubt that it would actually pull out that far. Anyways, it's completely repairable, and that's the simplest solution that I can think of that would allow them to continue using that tank fairly quickly after, because the outer side is just a tank shell. Now let's go to the two on the left that you wanted to go with, Zach, and what's going on here? What do you think?
Um, I don't know. I mean, this one is pretty bad. I feel like, you know, I mean, luckily there's this tank in front of it because I wondered just like if it would be structurally sound if there was a headwind on the front side of it. Because it's pretty crumpled, but I don't know. I mean, in my opinion, I would expect this one to get replaced. I mean, now they have an excuse to replace this water tank as well too, but that's a lot of work to do that. Yeah, I mean, it would take a very long time, I think, to do that because it's not just something you can just start tomorrow and complete because they don't have necessarily the space to do something like this right now because all of their operations inside of the Sanchez site where they constructed these before, there's just really no room to do it. So you would potentially have to do it at the launch site, which would um, I don't know if that would be an option here right now, but yeah, I mean, they definitely have the space to do it at the launch site. I just don't know if they would actually do something like that here because that would involve uh, moving another crane in and out of here every time they do static fire testing and whatnot. So, um, yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is one of those things that even if it's okay, like they just wouldn't want to look at it forever. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
you don't want to. I don't know. As much as this is about functionality and not about like how it looks, still it's just one of those things that kind of draws questions, I guess, from people who are visiting. Like, are these things even safe? So I feel like just eliminating that whole aspect of it is something that they would probably want to do. But it's also probably on the lower end of their list because obviously, very first priority is getting this launch mount back up and running. So,
yeah. One of the things that we talked about is that for that left tank to at least remove some of the dents and make it a little bit safer, but it's still unsafe even afterwards, would be to put pressurization inside of the um, basically the shell between that and the tank, and then you also pressurize the tank that's the inner tank as well, so that its differential pressure is basically zero. There's no or very little difference, and so you can pressurize the inner tank just higher than the outer tank, and basically you just pop the dents out with pressure. Um, that would be achievable. It's something they've done with Starship in the past quite a bit. It's just this is no longer very safe long term. So corrosion being an issue, wind being an issue, all you need is a hurricane to come along and create a bit more havoc there, and then you've got some issues. The one on the right, one thing I actually noticed, you can actually see the water line on the water tank that is supposed to be empty, but there's this discoloration where it looks like that's where there's a bit of like condensate on the outside or something because of humidity. And so you can see
mhm.
that there is a bit of like a just kind of gray water line on the current water tank. Do you see that, Zach?
Yeah, but I'm pretty positive this thing is empty because there's no way to get anything out of it. Because the original pipe that's right here is just there's nothing on the end of that. Maybe I need a.
Okay, so maybe that's where it used to be for the water line. Because I do remember seeing one in the past, and maybe that's just the same one because it's
Oh,
just discolored.
is it tapped into this?
Could be, or it
But
could
there's
be
no
that it's just an
return.
end cap.
The problem is there's no. Yeah, I think that's just an end cap. There's no return because this is actually the return. I think this is the supply and this is the return. So yeah, I highly doubt there's anything in here. But yeah, man. I mean, I'm not sure what else to say about this one. This is I feel like this is one of their tougher situations to deal with, even though it's not like super pressing. It's definitely one of the more difficult logistical wise to solve.
Yeah, we basically just need to assemble the crane over there with lots of mats to spread out the load and remove those shells, cut them up, and hopefully have some shells already to replace at least the one on the left, because it's still a protective shell. Or maybe they just do a mix and match, but I don't think either one of them would work. But anyways, it's logistically it's going to be very difficult to get that to happen. Maybe they'll wait for after the second flight, and it's like, okay, it took enough damage. Let's get rid of it now.
Yeah, and I mean, I think another possibility, and this is just super speculation, in the event that they are actually planning a second launch mount here, then, you know, once that one would become operational, which would, if they started now, probably be like a year and a half from now or something like that, then that would be a good time to do that. So you don't ever have to interrupt operations here, even though we're in the middle of an operation interruption. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be one to keep our eyes out for. What is going on here?
That's the pipe that was on the tank and it's fallen over. Yeah, so that's interesting. Is that like you can see how tall the tank was plus extra height because it went above the tank. So on the left here, it went up beyond that little mount, and yeah, it came off and it's fallen down, and that's one of the things they cleaned up.
So without this, well, they should. Okay, I was going to say without this tank, they may not have had the ability to reprocess all of the rest of the methane that was left over in the propellant lines, but I do think they have the ability to process everything through here if this isn't functional. So
it was functioning, what we could see. So basically after the launch, there was only one thing that seemed to be working right, and that was the methane reclamation system, and that's perfect. So it was probably pulling the methane from the lines that were currently there, basically pressurizing those, and then bringing it through back the loop to send it to here.
yeah, I mean, like again, really, really glad that there was no serious damage to any of this stuff. There was still
That's just the outer shells, but yeah, that you said serious damage, and it's like, ooh, cringe.
Yeah, I was like, I forgot about these tanks. Let's look at that from another side because you can actually see like a pretty nice dent on there.
Yeah, it looks like it bounced off that right-hand side. Now it's on the top, and then it hit the left-hand side, and then basically crumbled below. So it had like two different hits.
Could have sworn I had an angle that was a little bit more flat here. Let's see.
Yeah, there should be one. Mauricio got a lot of really good photos from all the angles, so you can see the issues like this.
I think if I switch over to these ones, we'll be able to see it better.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So, man, I don't see what hit this one, but
they cleaned that up already, I think.
Okay. So
it's just those were harder to access. You can see there's a skid loader just above that they're like cleaning stuff up. So probably by next week, this is all cleaned up. You won't see much concrete on the pads or anywhere else, or even in areas like this. They might have to get a jackhammer to break up some of it, but it should be manageable. And that, again, it's just that these are shells for all of these tanks. So you see the outside and then the inside, as long as it's like these should be vacuum insulated pipe or tanks. So as long as you haven't punctured it, it's still functional. But once you punctured it, then you have to go through, patch it, and recertify it that it's basically can hold a vacuum, and that allows you to maintain the cryogenics for longer durations. Oh, we've got a lot of questions coming up.
Yeah, let's go ahead and answer some of them.
All right, let's see here. Give me a second while I pull up the question.
Yeah, just tons just popped up all at once here, so I wanted to get through some of those as we can.
All right, let's do the first question here. Did Starbase have any insurance coverage for any of the damage? Pretty sure, right? That was part of the mitigation.
Yeah, they're self-insured, I think. So their insurance basically would be they'd have to have either insurance or up to what was it, $503 million of insurance. So if they have cash on hand, meaning they haven't spent it, or they go through and just pay a premium, um, that basically is money that they don't get to keep. They have to send to somebody else. Um, Either one of those options would work. So they'd have to have basically money in the bank or an insurer that they pay that would have that.
All right, the next question is from Benjamin Klein. SpaceX can build the water-cooled steel plate, but the worries of the, I guess, people there about the exhaust being toxic is another big problem. Your opinions?
It's Methalox, which is basically going to be water and CO2. The concrete itself, which would be the stuff that got kicked up, it's basically the same kind of stuff that you would have for any concrete batch manufacturing facility. I mean, the larger stuff is already comes out of the air as basically sand. Anything else would basically be gasified into mostly like oxygen and a little bit of alumina, stuff like that. But I don't think you really got to those temperatures, so it's not a big issue. So the only other thing that you can have would basically be any of the stuff that was on fire afterwards. That stuff is more toxic, especially if it's like unburnt hydrocarbons or something like that. But you're talking about either diesel truck grade or worse. That's basically what you'd be looking at.
All right, the next question is from John Doppker. How are they going to go about filling in the crater under the OLM? Compact some dirt into it, rebar the heck out of it, and fill it in with concrete? Seems like a daunting task ahead of it to fix it. Isn't the concrete, I mean, the crater, I mean, they still had to dig up to rebuild the whole thing, right? So, I mean, the crater kind of did some of the work.
Yeah. So one of the things is that you could see these piles right underneath the that are these concrete blocks or cylinders. Yeah, those were at least 26 of them, what I could count from the original part. Yeah, there's I think one right under your mouse. They had like a single stick of rebar or thick rebar that was sticking up that would connect to other things. Yeah, there's another one. They have to pull out all of those, and they're doing that right now. In fact, so they're getting that all excavated out because that's just junk that would basically decrease their process. Um, it's one of my hopes, not an actual thing that they will do, but it's my hope that they'll put in a bit of steel plating around the. So you see where that rebar on the left basically came apart. I'm hoping that they will put steel plating around it, just in case ever in the future that this happens again. It will protect that compression ring, so that hexagon shape that basically this is all made out of keeps the legs together, and then the legs themselves have piles that are not maybe piles, but the correct term would be basically columns that go down about 120, 140 feet. And those basically are what support the entire launch table and everything else there. There was some minor damage to that, but it doesn't look too bad. The rebar could basically be replaced, and a lot of this is actually pretty easy to fix. Basically, you have to basically do some forms around each part, like the rebar, and then the columns themselves. They need to basically add additional concrete around those areas just to make sure that there's no additional damage here, or I'm sorry, replace any damage to the columns or the piles that they have here. And yes, they will have to fill in the area that basically would be the dirt. So basically, they'll put in compressed backfill, maybe do a thicker layer of concrete just above that, and then above that, all of that should be the steel plates, which will be two of those at least. So they may go through and change their designs based off of what they were going to do and what they are, because like they had a huge change in plans here, and then there'll also be water being delivered to it. That's what Zach was talking about over at Sanchez. So if you want to answer a bit more there, and we do have more questions coming up, but that's still a good one to keep going on.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we won't like the risk to it ever happening again will be close to zero. I think that they have learned from the situation, and they are now. I feel like they were probably aware of it before, but now they're definitely have no questions on how much this needs to be protected. So I feel like once they add in the water cooled plates underneath here, that there will be close to no chance of that ever happening again. That's assuming they don't erode all the way through, but I mean, even still, ideally you're going to have a base layer under that, and even the base layer, I think they probably will have, they're pretty aware that they have to upgrade the base of it as well too. So yeah, I don't know. I just don't really, I'm really positive about like what the future holds for this. Still sad about its current condition, but everything is a learning tool essentially. So now they, as I said, and now they know.
Yeah.
You don't want to do this ever again. So yeah, I mean, there I think are a lot of people out there who will still say that it's not going to be enough because it's a flat plate, but it was enough for the 31 engine static fire test, which means that if you just increase the strength and its ability to cool itself and not uh, become destroyed just to heat damage alone, then I think that it's probably pretty likely that that design actually will work out pretty well. So
Yeah, I like the idea of the steel plates part. One of the things that would have to be added to it is additional strength and weight underneath it, because you don't want it to be able to somehow pull up. And if it does pull up, you do want some basically protection. That's where I would say the steel encasings is a useful idea. They might not do it, but it's still a direction that I would prefer to see, because I don't ever want to see these this compression ring and the columns exposed ever again, even if it went worst case. One of the things I actually grabbed, if Zach, you want to pull this up, that kind of shows one of the issues is with pressure of the vehicle itself, as well as kind of the frequencies that the vehicle is using. So this is called a resonant rumbling. It basically goes through and destroys the concrete by going about 40 times a second at about 1 US ton of pressure on the concrete. Technically, the booster is going to be putting off at least 5,000 tons over a larger area, but you're talking about kind of the same forces here. So they use this to do road pair work by basically turning the, like, this is a good description of the side of it. Basically, the smaller stuff is at the top, but with the booster, in a sense, it's doing the same thing. That's what happened, but it also removed all that small stuff. And so you can use this as road aggregate that's pretty much built in place because it's your old road. And then you can build on top of that after you level it out. So anyways, that was the quick view that I wanted to show, that this is something that's already in the construction industry that pretty much the booster replicated to an extreme level, because this is kind of a lot of what we got. So yeah, this is just a quick old YouTube video that I found that worked to be kind of interesting to understand, like, how this happened for Starship. So the 40 times a second was enough, as you can see, to just push down on that concrete, and you get this, plus all the pressure of just everything being lifted and pushed away to an extreme level.
yeah, it's pretty intense, that's for sure.
Yeah.
One of the odd things that I've noticed here is that these two um, uh, hoods for the QDs are not singed like all the other ones are, which is really odd.
Must have used the paint that the engine bell has, those numbers that are on the inside. That stuff lasted through static fires, so maybe they're using the same paint, or something else occurred there. one thing that people brought up is, was it the engines that went out at liftoff? And no, those don't seem to coincide with that.
Yeah. Speaking of paint, I mean, I feel like looking at the way the top surface um, handled itself, like if they put the stainless steel over this ring right here, then they would never have to paint it ever again.
I hear they've got a lot of 4mm stainless steel sitting around, so that'd be a
Really?
cool addition.
Man, the booster QD looks rough from here, but I mean, it's just really the paint singed off it, and with the doors removed, it looks like it got blasted out. But they actually ended up removing these, so that's not really a huge deal. I feel like we should check out some ground images of this.
Yeah. One thing that while you're pointing that out to talk about is they've been removing parts of the inside of the table, specifically um, the booster QDs, the outer booster 20 QD systems. Did you have any thoughts on that?
I did, but I was going to save them.
Okay.
Because I didn't have public images of them. They're all on Starship Gazer's server. So, yeah, it's one of those things that I was going to talk about as far as aftermath. So, I will reserve that comment.
Okay.
Still trying to decide how it happened or what it means. So, yeah.
I will give you my quick interpretation. I think it's just for Booster 9. They're going to a different system for engine chill, that it collects it through that system instead of having hoses, so you don't have to replace things every launch. I think that's a better engineering approach. So that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. It's odd how many of those flex hoses that they removed, but yeah, I mean, overall, I would say that everything up top over here did pretty well. I mean, if we look at the ground images, there are some parts of that system that underneath the table that did sustain some damage, but we reviewed that last week. It wasn't horrible. But the good news is, I mean, they're already well into the process of Jesus. Sorry, it always just shocks me seeing it look like this with all of the paint just removed and it how quickly it rusts.
Salty Sea Air does that.
Yeah, for sure. But you can see down here they're already there's a ton of rebar down here that's still here, but there was even more before that they've already started to remove, and I think they've actually have a front end loader today that. Oops, that's not the right direction. Yeah, they have a skid steer down there excavating everything. I don't think I have an image looking all the way to the left over there. Or do I? This is a good one. Maybe. Yeah, we still see all these massive amounts of rebar over here, which will probably quickly be removed. But, the big thing that they're worried about is the structure down here. So this will come kind of secondary to that. Although, like I said, they're just making progress in general on cleaning all this stuff up, especially at front of the site, like in front of the suborbital tank farm and the entrance. Everything.
They'll have to remove that doghouse, by the way. You've got a good view of that.
Yeah,
they're going to have to remove it. You can see on the left, it's torn right from there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it lifted up on this side closest to us, just to make sure that everybody's aware that the columns didn't settle or anything. It was just the doghouse lifted up on this end.
Yeah, glad this didn't lift off. Interesting little feature here with those. This reminds me of the breakaway tabs on something.
Yeah. Well, here's the funny part: is that little doghouse, as we call it, would have been Toto's doghouse, and Dorothy's. Kind of a good reference there.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we said this last week. Like with the cryo tubes underneath here, is really good that it didn't penetrate all the way through. Like whatever. As the debris was flying through here, it's good that it didn't actually, as far as we know, damage that cryo tube or actually destroy it, which would have been very obvious if that happened. So, yeah, I mean, as bad as it looks, it could have been worse. And so, as I said a few minutes ago, it's just learning. You just have to learn these lessons and then move on from there. So, glad to see that the work that they're doing so far kind of leads us in the direction to assume that it is actually repairable. So, you know, I when I viewed this for the first time, I did not think this was repairable. And that's partially because I also believed that these were post-tensioned rebar, or post-tension cables in here, which, I mean, if I was designing it, that's probably what I would have done, just because of how important this base structure is. But post-tensioned cables, basically, just like you have your rebar in here, and then once you actually place the concrete inside, you actually pull the rebar cables, or not, they're not rebar cables, but tension cables on either side in order to actually increase the strength. Basically, so, and this is really hard to show without a video, which I'm in the process of explaining. But yeah, long story short, assumed that this was a process that you wouldn't be able to do again once it's completed. And it looks like it's just regular rebar cages in here instead of post-tension cables. So, you know, that was my mind state when I said that this is not repairable. But it looks like it is. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with being wrong. I'm actually glad I'm wrong about that. So we will see how that progresses. But, you know, the fact that they're up here doing all this work on the top of the table and whatnot, whatever they're doing up here, it is a good sign that, you know, it is repairable. So we will keep tuning in every week and giving you guys the updates on how that process is going.
I'll go through some more images and questions while we're going along.
Sure. Yeah, let's touch on some questions.
All right. Let's see. Question from Crane Man. Why are the 2 or 3 of the booster support arms still gray and the rest oxidized?
Oh, I guess we kind of answered that. We're not really 100% sure why that is. Yeah, it was just an interesting observation I made a few minutes ago, but I don't really have a good idea of why that is. Initially, I thought these might line up with the engines that were out during startup, but they were actually adjacent to each other, so that theory is kind of out of the water. But
Better
yeah,
paint, maybe.
yeah, I mean, thicker paint on it on these ones than on the rest of them, and yeah, I mean, it's interesting because from my understanding, the booster moved in this direction, away from the tower. So I would actually expect if there was anything that wasn't burnt, it would be on this side.
Oh no, those would definitely be burnt because the thrust would be pointed to the back side of the QD to be pushed away that way.
Right.
So those actually might be partly because the booster wasn't getting as much impingement on them. But you can see the top of the one on the left at the bottom. That one has at least the top section of it, or what would be the top when it's folded down. It's pretty corroded there. So that's another good reason.
All right. The next question is from Santi. Where did the door land in relation to the OLM? The door for the one I took photos of. I think there's a ground shot, but if there's a wide enough shot, you might be able to see.
I've got a shot of the door from a different perspective. You didn't grab. Was from a friend of mine who was down there and took a picture. If you want to show that,
Exactly.
Zach.
What was that?
There's a picture. You can't see it, but if you want to pull that up,
Yeah,
I was going to say
the
you
air
can
really
actually see
quick.
it in this image. So
You can.
yes. Oh, well, the question was how far away was it from the OLM? You can just go up a little bit higher on that image, and you can see it right there. That's yeah.
That's a puddle. It's the doors to the left, I think.
Right here.
Right there. That looks like it should be the door.
Yikes.
Yeah, pull up the image I just posted in live comms as well. It shows the door, and it's very useful because you can understand a bit more of what happened with the door.
I cannot open that type of file. It's an HEIC. I don't have anything to open that.
Oh, interesting.
You don't have an Android phone?
No, but I'm also on my computer doing this, so.
Understood.
Well, I guess we'll skip that for now then.
Sorry about that. Maybe you could take a screenshot of it and send it to me, and I can open it that way.
Oh yeah, that would be perfect. Just take a second. But also, if you can grab a ground shot of the side of the orbital launch mount, because I've got something that'll be interesting explaining. So two things that are at the same time.
Which side?
So the side that's Highway 4 where the door came off. That one's got a boom lift in front of it, so it's harder.
How about this one?
Oh, perfect. Absolutely perfect. So I talked about this last week, but this is even better, is there is scratch marks all along that right-hand side that didn't exist before the launch, but you can see that it really gouged into the steel. And I've got that screenshot for you to pop up as well. I think what was actually going on is that the concrete was the culprit here. I think that it rammed into the right-hand side of the door. You can actually see there's just that pointed spot where it's all pointed to. That's the same side where you've got a bulge in the right-hand side of the door. The door itself isn't like bulged out from compression, like gas is trying to escape. This is more of a side impact. So I think it got impacted on the side and then just sheared off by the Raptors. So that says that there was no explosion inside of the table, which is really good. And that the pressures inside the table were probably nominal. And this just was not a good day for the door itself. But yeah, it's just a quick explanation of something that people are looking at. And this is the best photo I can find so far that shows what's going on with that door and what probably happened. There's plenty of theories out there, so you can believe whatever you'd like to on this one, but it's just that was the interpretation that I took.
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I don't think explosions on the inside of the table would cause that kind of damage because of the fact that they added all these vents on here in order to prevent that.
Yeah, and the other side didn't blow out, and you don't see any of these vents blown out. Like you should see the inside of the vent like curled outwards because there's got going to be some pressure there as well. I don't see any of those. But again, just my interpretation, and it's just an interesting view of like how these things work. They've got that scaffolding off to the right, means that they're actually pushing to get up there and get access to the top of the table without boom lifts, and looks like they'll have easier access to that leg as well.
Just got to use the ladder.
Yeah, pretty much. Spending 40 seconds on a ladder versus 4 minutes on a boom lift raising up. I think the 40 seconds going up this way is, a little bit harder, but so much more or less effort, I guess you could say, in a time sense. As long as you're not carrying tools up and other things.
And speaking of ladders, I mean, do you think it's looking like this one's going all the way up to the top of the?
That one's weird. I think the door got put in the wrong spot, honestly. Like the door should have been here, not over to the right. And that would have made perfect sense to put this here. But yeah, that's a really strange one. So this could be a ladder sense or a bunch of different options. They could even do it for getting up onto the what's that called? BART. Like that would be another option, but we haven't seen a spiral staircase or anything that would do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we could tell this was planned to basically be this way from the beginning, but they took it down before the launch and it came back after the launch. And it's not just a work order on hold. I think it's we need this. This is going to be useful. But the issue is I don't see where it's going to be accessed from at this point.
Yeah, I mean, this one's gonna make the whole table look ugly. I feel like because it sticks out so far.
Well, they'll get it covered up, and that'll make it look nice again, right?
I mean,
Just like
look
that.
Look how far it's. I need a better. You can see how far it sticks out from the edge.
Yeah. Yeah, I swear that door was supposed to be there, and they just got in the wrong spot. So maybe we'll see them go through and cut some holes in it.
Yeah, and I also considered that maybe it would end up being the same as this one, but they don't look the same.
No, this one curves out. This one goes straight up.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up removing that panel off the side and putting a new one with the door there.
They'll probably be two doors, 3 doors. Sorry, because if you actually scroll up, there's another door, just accessible from this position, I think. Yeah, but
Oh,
yeah,
you mean
it's gonna be interesting. Yeah, the other one, but that door on the left, it's offset as well, which makes sense. You do want to be able to crane parts in and out of the launch table, and having stairs block that path would be a problem. Well, do we have any additional questions or anything else we want to go over before we wrap up here?
Yes, we have lots. We have lots of donations and lots of questions. Mauricio, if you don't mind, I'll start off with the donations. We also want to welcome Flawed Perspective as a new RGV member. Welcome to the team. We also received donations from Brian X, who donated 20 Canadian dollars and says a few bucks to keep the flights going. Great work, fantastic photos. Rocket Profit donated 19.99 and says awesome show and wants us to pass over the cash to Mauricio for fuel, please. John Dopker donated $10 and says, just because. I appreciate everything you all at RGV do to keep us informed and entertained. Fly safe, Mauricio. And then
We lost Indian Star there.
darn it, I always let go. I get cold and put my hands under my legs because I'm cold, and then I let go. Sorry, sorry about that. We also got sorry. We also got a donation from Ted G, who donated $20 and says, "Thanks for all the extra work in April." And yeah, if you all want to donate through PayPal, most of that, I think there's only a $4 surcharge that they take off the top. They are the platform that gives Mauricio the most amount of money. So PayPal is the way to go if you can do it. If not, we appreciate your donations through YouTube and Patreon. And that's it for the donations. I'll hand it over to Mauricio.
All right, and just to answer Santi's question on how far it went, I did a rough calculation. It's about 228 meters. That's how far it went out into the wetlands. But yeah, let me go back to the questions. I'll answer. There's way too many questions. I'll probably get to about a few here. So, any rubble on top of the Mechazilla, and if there is, I hope they leave it there and memorialize from Yay.
Only rubble that I could find would be inside the drawworks. There's a bit there, and they probably cleaned it up.
All right, the next question is, wasn't that those tanks integrity tested last night, 200 plus mile per hour winds? I feel like it didn't get up too high, the wind gust. There was a storm system that pushed through Starbase, and it was already dissipating. We definitely got the worst of it over here in the western, southern Texas area. But and then the next question is, how much of that concrete that ended up at the marshlands will SpaceX have to clean up or remove from FMC 123?
Okay, so that basically is now part of the environment. One thing that SpaceX should do is remove any of the rebar that would basically puncture or poke people or animals. But a lot of it's just too big to move around or too small to pick up. So now that it's basically there, it's part of the environment, and that's what basically the U.S. Fish and Wildlife or the Texas Parks Department, they will go through and say, just leave it, don't touch it. It's on SpaceX property, and basically that's also, for the most part, for that. But anything else that's on their property, they don't want them going out and moving it or touching it because it actually disturbs the soil to do that, and that creates more issues.
All right, and the next question is from We Will Rocket You. Where is the large deluge piping that was buried already?
Do you want to show that, Zach? It's the
Yeah. 1 second. Let's get us over there.
okay, but yeah. So the piping itself is, as you mentioned, buried. It basically goes from that side where you can see those two lines popping out, where there's water, and then all the way over to that plate right there. What was the next question?
All right, the next question is there anything they can do to repaint the entire OLM after every launch? It's already corroding. Is that a problem?
I think the best solution is just stainless steel plates everywhere. That fixes the corrosion problem. Cybertruck was right.
All right, the next question here is from Martian Soon. There was some fire after the launch. Do you know where and what was on fire?
If you want to show out the zoomed out image, Mauricio can point it out to you a little bit more because he was out there and he knows exactly where that is. Oh, there's that one.
About the fire on the.
Yeah. So okay, there was the fire at the pad. If you go up to the top right corner, never mind.
Okay.
There's that one.
Sorry.
But yeah, if you go to the top right corner a little bit, Zach, I can show exactly where that was for one of the larger fires, and it kind of kept going for a bit. Can you go any further right?
No.
Okay, so it was basically to the entrance. There was a bunch of drums right there. So where that red stuff is, oh my goodness, even more. Yep. So stuff over there got pummeled, and some of it probably caught in fire. But it's above it is where the actual fire was. So go to the left a little bit more. So yes, just to the left of the keep out clear area, there was a fire over here. There was drums that had basically caught fire. There's not much left of it. Lots of dust, but that was it.
All right, and looks like we're out of time. Unless anybody else want to say anything else before we wrap it up here.
A couple of donations that just came in. James L donated $20 and Senti donated $1.99. And then we also have a few more RGV aerial new team members. We have Juan G, Siddharth P, Michael Anthony, and then we have a lot of generous donators who donated gift memberships. RGV, I'm sorry, you are RGV. Jim Cavett donated to Stephen Lewis. 55 Chevy Guy donated 5 memberships. Justin IAMO, he received one. Detroit, Michigan Control, Sandeep K, Quite Gone Jim, Johnny 303. And then we also received another donator was Ashley, who donated 5 memberships, not 55, 5 memberships. And they went to Regbook, We Will Rocket You, Caretake, Martin Soon, and Arcful. So thank you all for your generous donations and for donating to other people as well. That's all I wanted to say.
I think I can answer 2 questions that are basically on the list, and they're the same area here. Martin Soon said, any GSE or tank shell building started yet? Nope. We haven't seen anything yet on that. And then the Fisco one asked, I always thought they had access holes in the tank farm tanks, or was it just the water tanks? And yes, they do, but they're at the very bottom of the tank itself. And the manhole I'm talking about cutting for basically doing some fixing, it would be a temporary manhole, not a permanent one. Because the perlite is in there. You don't want it to come out. You have to basically do a temporary thing. I think that was it for the questions I can answer really quick here. So I'll go ahead and bow out and say thank you again for having me this week. It was amazing to go through and share what I've learned with all of you, and working with Zach and Indian Star and Jax and Mauricio. It's always an honor. So I'll hand it over to you first, Mauricio.
Yes, thank Thomas, Zach, Indian Stars, the whole team that makes these live streams possible. And I want to thank everybody that's been watching since the beginning or recently. And the supporters, the flight supporters, we can't do this without you. Definitely getting more, a lot of expenses with the rentals and the drone replacement, which I want to thank everybody. We already have that replacement, as you can see from the drone flight at Massey's. So photos came out really good. Drone operates at it's a pretty good drone. It's a pretty good drone, so no complaints there. And I did want to announce about the flyover situation. I do want to do it tomorrow, just because that's according to the forecast. I mean, next week we're going to have weather similar to this week. So unless we want to roll the dice and hope for a flyover closer to the weekend, then I think tomorrow's the best bet. Tomorrow's going to be sunny. There shouldn't be any clouds whatsoever, so it should be a clear day. So we are going to attempt the flyover tomorrow. Just wanted to put it out there and the reasoning why we're doing that.
Mauricio, do you think it might be a double flyover week?
I mean, I mean, at this point, I don't know. I mean, the YouTube donations, we don't receive them till further down the line. If we get more donations on PayPal, um, we might be able to do a flyover later in the week, like I said. But if we get the enough funds, just because of, we got to make sure we're able to do it financially, right?
But also
And
the reason you're not doing it is because of the weather, right?
right now, the decision why we're doing it tomorrow, I want to emphasize, is because of how the forecast looks for next week. There's days that it could work, there's days that it won't work, and why don't we just do it on why don't we just secure the flyover and for tomorrow, because the weather looks really good, right? Or we can roll the dice and just hope for a flyover, and maybe we won't get a flyover next week. So that's always an option, but I'm sure everybody prefers a flyover.
Yes. Everybody, including me, prefers a flyover.
And that's it for me. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and I'll pass it along to Indian Star Zach.
Go ahead, Zach.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this week. I'm always happy to be here and love being able to cover this stuff every single week, because it's nice being able to educate people on, what's going on at Starbase. And thank you, Mauricio, as always, for all the hard work to gather all these images, both the aerials and the ground shots. Like I said before, there's 251 ground images and
42.
42 aerial, or sorry, other way around. But yeah, so over 500 images for all the patrons. So thanks, Mauricio, for all that hard work. And with that, I will see you all next week.
My turn.
Maybe.
Just want to say bye, peeps. Thanks for joining us. Hope to see you next week. Main engine cut off. Stage separation confirmed. Love you. Bye.